COAD. And many of you may know VOAD, which is Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. COAD is an offshoot. It's the same. It's just that our organization felt like the community comes together during times of disaster, and we felt calling it COAD, Community Organizations Active in Disaster, was more fitting for our community. So we are affiliated with VOAD, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that is why we chose VOAD, or COAD, sorry. Even I confused myself. So what is COAD? COAD is guided by 4 principles, the same as VOAD, of the 4 C's: cooperation, communication, coordination, and collaboration. COAD helps to streamline disaster service efforts of agencies, organizations, with a goal of efficient use of resources to ensure that duplication of efforts are minimized. And that's really important in a disaster. COAD and VOAD focus on the recovery efforts. We focus on donation management. Daniela Sands is a good example of how VOAD comes together and puts a great organization together. And as I said, we are an affiliate of VOAD. It's a national, state, and local entity organization. VOAD was founded in 1970 by organizations that were committed to unifying their response to disasters. Volunteer organizations through their local affiliates are often the first on the scene for a disaster. Why? Because many organizations are community-based and are able to mobilize quickly and provide immediate assistance such as feeding, sheltering, clothing, and monetary donations for individuals and families. And there's so many wonderful organizations in this community that provide resources during times of disasters. And the COAD is, its idea is to bring those organizations together, to be more efficient and effective with the resources and get them out to the community. We have some awesome COAD partners. The Mendocino COAD is sponsored by North Coast Opportunities, who provide services throughout the county, and they actually provide services in 7 counties. We have 2 major partners. So for years, the VOAD had been in Mendocino County, but we hadn't had a major disaster like we experienced in 2017 with the fires. So a lot of organizations and entities did not know what VOAD was. But we had developed a plan to be able to respond to the needs of the fire survivors. And those 2 major partners were the Community Foundation of Mendocino County and North Coast Opportunities. And the plan was designed that the Community Foundation was able to receive monetary donations, and NCO would be the responding organization that would help get those resources out. And it worked really well. It works really well. We have some other wonderful partners. There's many, many, many to list, but some that are very active, continually active. Of course, of North Coast Opportunities, the Community Foundation of Mendocino County, Red Cross, American Salvation Army, the United Way of the Wine Country, and as I said, there's many, many others. In 2017, as I mentioned earlier, the VOAD activated, we were VOAD then, in response to the fires. And from our activation, the Mendocino Rebuild Our Community was formed, or the MROC. Many of you are probably very familiar with the MROC. The MROC was able to provide immediate relief following the disaster, which included motel, gas vouchers, food, medication vouchers, and so much more. We were able to distribute these things within 24 hours. critical needs designed to remove barriers to stable, safe, long-term housing or work. We provided rental assistance. We helped purchase or rebuild homes for the fire survivors from the 2017 fires. Community recovery efforts to help the community recover and become more resilient is always our goal. We even helped the animals during our recovery efforts from the 2017 fires. We helped work with organizations that provided kids activities to restore a sense of normalcy for children impacted by fires. There were homestretch funds to help with replacing furniture once fire survivors were able to return home. Other support such as helping seniors, support for educators, and so much more. In all, we distributed more than $4 million to fire survivors in our communities to help during this time of need. And again, that's what the COAD is about, is how do we help our community in a time of need? Then COVID hit. Again, the COAD stepped up and is providing response now. The Community Foundation and NCO, there's food relief to individuals who are experiencing food insecurities. Funds helping senior centers and the food banks throughout the counties. Immediate assistance for rental and utilities. Funds to targeted nonprofits experience increased demand due to COVID-19. And funds to help assist small businesses have been distributed around our county. Again, with the goal to help our community recover from these disasters. So why get involved? As I said earlier, we changed our name to COAD because we believe in our community and our community is strong. And so it takes a community. We believe in the whole community. It takes a community to help during a disaster and after a disaster. It's extremely important to have donations management during a disaster, as Daniela could speak to, and it takes several volunteers to help with this effort. Maybe you're not part of an organization at this time, but the COAD is always in need of volunteers to help during these disaster times. Disaster resources continue to support those experiencing extreme hardships during disasters. And it's people like you watching, the community, that can help us achieve those goals. When the 2017 fires devastated our community, again, it was our community that stepped up to help. And either by making donations or volunteering time, and it's so appreciated. Join the COAD, learn how to donate and volunteer successfully during a disaster. Help us keep providing great resources to our community and those in need. There are fires currently in our county. We will be here to help. I hope you'll join us. If you have more questions, please feel free to, there's some phone numbers I'm going to give you. There is the volunteer network. You can contact them to find out how to get involved with COAD, and that's 462-1959, 462-1959. Also, NCO currently has case managers helping people through difficult times dealing with COVID and fires. You can contact a disaster case manager at 707-621-8817, 707-621-8817. And then there's the Fire Recovery Center, which Danielle will probably talk about later. And their number is 489-3970. So thank you for watching. And
we're going to talk about preparedness and what it's doing for us, but we also need to talk about the fires that are currently burning. I think that we need to talk about, the successes and areas that we need to improve in. because we've got some real life stuff going on right now. And I think that if you practice like you play, everything gets better. It all gets easier. Um, so currently, one of our biggest pushes that we saw this year was the evacuation of the Brook Trails area. And believe it or not, that is something that everyone involved in Mendocino County has been dreading. We have been just scared to death that something will happen in Brook Trails and we will have to evacuate it. And that's probably one of our bigger success stories, is that the Board of Supervisors, the CEO's office, Office of Emergency Services, have been working and supporting these fire safe councils and the people who know their areas and the people who are affected. And the evacuation of Brook Trails was probably the smoothest evacuation I've ever seen in my life. And that was for a lot of reasons. It wasn't anything great that we did. It was what the residents did and their understanding of things. We got ahead of that so that we knew if that fire jumped into Brook Trails, we should have 6 to 8 hours to get people out instead of that terrible 30 minutes that they had in the Paradise area. And people heeded the warnings. They took it seriously. They were ready to go. A few of the things that we didn't see coming were a lot of calls for service for ambulances for people who fell, people who hadn't been out of their homes because they were older people. COVID restrictions had them locked down. They hadn't been out getting the exercise. We had a lot of fall victims, and that's something that we didn't see coming. We're adjusting to that now. We're paying attention to those types of things, and it's some of that trial and error. Granted, the COVID restrictions have kept a lot of people in their homes more than what we'd like to see. All of us as a society don't want to be cooped up in the fashion that we have been, and it's having some impacts on us in places that we didn't see coming. What do you think, Brent?
I think Sheriff points out a lot of great points, and I would also say that even with the evacuation aspects, HHS, our Health and Human Services Division, did a fantastic job adjusting shelter operations, coming up with new and unique ways in order to help those that maybe were isolating due to COVID or were on quarantine orders, and finding ways to either get them in hotels, put them in Whitmore Lane, even taking in animals and being able to separate people that maybe are having medical concerns, addressing that, and then getting animals placed into sheltering. So it was really a team effort. And again, it's more of the community's, a reflection of the community's ability to be prepared and take heed the warning as fire kind of threatened certain areas.
So the other thing that we look at as we continue on with this is we've got a good basic understanding of it now. And just like anything else, once you get the basic understanding of it down and the education is being put out to our residents, that's when we have to drill down further into these unforeseen problems that we hadn't seen in the past with the COVID stuff and with the falls, with the elderly people who are trying to get out of their homes in an orderly fashion. We're going to begin drilling down into those things to come up with some real good solid solutions, because we realize that they are there now. These issues are there now. And over the next few months, when the fires die down and we can start getting ahead of things again, that's when we can get that information out. That's when we can get drilled down. We can get services set up in these areas for this type of thing again, because we're aware of what the problems are going to be.
Yeah, again, all great points. I think another aspect of it might be as we move forward, now we know, what the services are needed, who to make connections with, how to build better relationships with nonprofits and encourage more community engagement between different community members. Because time and time again, history shows survival, coming out ahead of a disaster is really about communities coming together and kind of helping at the lowest denomination to help people move, get out of the way, and taking action early. So I think those partnerships and gaps that we identify during a disaster, right afterwards, it's the time to take that energy and kind of build those relationships so that we can continue to see improvement for future.
I don't want to, you guys can continue.
So basically what the sheriff's office has is we take on 100% of the response to these emergencies. And I mean the alert and warning, the door-to-door knocking on doors to get people alerted to the emergency, the evacuations. We also take on a lot of the liaison between sheltering, between different facets of the emergency operations system. And that's what Brent does for us. He's got, in the downtime when we aren't dealing with emergencies, he's dealing with getting things ready to go for the next one. Maybe Brent, you could kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's really a lot of in the moment. There's the what do you need to do, a lot of the coordination aspects, whether it's within the county departments or across county agencies, and a lot of city partnerships, and massing resources. So how do we borrow law enforcement officers? That's a big thing that the sheriff's department does when they see a huge need for evacuation. How do they borrow medical for emergency medical, things like that. So in the moment, it's a lot of coordination, and really what OES is about, Office of Emergency Services, is really about the information management. Where is the problem? All right, this is what the sheriff's department needs, or different field response, PG&E, whoever, gathering up that information and trying to keep the executive staff and different policymakers informed. So it's kind of taking the tactical information that's going on and letting them know strategically where we're going, because that's a kind of a different paradigm than what we normally do, where they get to make decisions. It's going so fast that we need field response to be as supportive as possible in order to contain the issue. By normally, when we're not having an emergency, OES is more focused on doing the planning aspect, because a plan's only as good as when you initially have an incident. So you do all the planning and then hope that it's going to go according to plan, and then adjust, as the fire drags on, or pandemic, or whatever it might be. So a lot of it's planning and grants and stuff like that, and trying to buy all the equipment or find creative solutions to problems that you don't really have the resources for during the moment. So that's a lot of what OES is, and the sheriff's department, houses those responsibilities also in partnership with the county executive, Carmel, just to try to make sure that we can take and borrow things from other departments in order to service the public or the cities in whatever fashion needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, in my world, strangely enough, the easiest governments that I ever get to deal with in Mendocino County are tribal governments. And the reason is they're small. I can call up the Round Valley tribe and they will hold a meeting in 15 minutes, and they can make decisions immediately. And that's kind of what our Office of Emergency Services, when we open up the Emergency Operations Center, it basically becomes this small government of people who are allowed to make decisions immediately based upon what the needs are and what the availability of resources are. So it becomes this small government basically to manage an emergency, and the bureaucracy is completely pulled out of it so that we can move at a pace that serves the public. A big portion of that, of course, is to keep the Board of Supervisors in the loop, to keep every government in the loop about the directions that we're going. But there are a lot of decisions that have to be made so rapidly. When we have to evacuate places at 2 o'clock in the morning, we can't wait for a resolution from the Board of Supervisors to do this. We've got to keep them briefed up. But at the same time, this is about action during an emergency and planning during the non-emergencies. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a strange way to have to explain things, but during emergencies, we've got to be able to make it. We've got to be able to make things happen at an extremely rapid pace, and that's what saves lives.
Afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I hope that it is a little less smoky where you are than where we are. But The smoke makes us very, very clear that we have several challenges that we're facing all at the same time. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about the Mendocino Coast Children's Fund. We are the oldest grassroots child advocacy program in Mendocino County. And because children live in families, we are the oldest family response organization as well. We're a grassroots organization that started in 1992. We're located on the coast. We basically started around a kitchen table of neighbors who were concerned about the fact that there were children who had needs that were not being served and not being seen. Since that time, 28 years ago, we have taken on several challenges. Children, of course, live in families and children live in communities. And for the last several years, our communities have been dealing with the impact of wildfires. The first time that had a direct impact on the coast was in 2015 when the fires started in Lower Lake and people from Lake County start coming to the coast to get clear air and cleaner air. And they came by the hundreds. And every year since then, we have had fires and we have had people coming to the west side of the county who have health challenges, asthma, heart conditions, being treated for cancer, pregnant young infants who have had a great need to get to where there is clean air. So while we've been fortunate not to have a fire directly in our own community for several years, we definitely see ourselves as your neighbors. And we see ourselves as a resource for people that are dealing with particularly difficult challenges. We have for several years created a pop-up free thrift store. And as people have come into the community, they've been directed to us. And as much as possible, we have tried to connect them with motel rooms, with food cards, with gift cards for gas, with clothing, with sleeping bags, connect them with possibilities for places where they could tent camp, connected them with social services, with churches. We network very, very closely with about 40 or 50 organizations on the coast. And that network has been built up because we know that when there's a crisis, you have to be ready to move. You can't wait for your county or state or federal government to give you direction. The more inches you are away from the center of power, the larger your geographical area and the smaller your population, the less likely that you're going to get a response outside of the community to serve you. Not because FEMA doesn't care, or the Red Cross doesn't care, or Sacramento doesn't care, or Washington doesn't care, but just the logistics of number of people to be served based on the square mileage that we cover makes us all very vulnerable. We are dealing now with some unprecedented challenges. It started with COVID in early March. And we recognized in early March, as we met across the county with many organizations within the county, through an organization called BOAD, which is Volunteer Organizations for Disaster Assistance, that we really needed to scale up very, very quickly. And so if you're listening from Laytonville, or you're listening from Gualala, or you're listening from Hopland, or you're listening from Covelo, the things I'm sharing with you are universally true, regardless of where you are in the county. The most important thing that you can do as a community is to create a strong community network. A network of us, not us versus them, but a network that is a circle that includes everybody. Your schools, your local county representatives for social services, your fire departments, your service clubs, your churches, your hobby groups, whether it's people that are bicyclists or people that are quilters, the Grange, any organization that already exists in your community is a possible resource for strengthening your community when you're facing challenges. we have been working in our community, which is basically the coastal area of the 4th and 5th district from Westport down to Gualala and inland to Comshy, to make sure that resources are on hand ahead of time, so that when people are coming to here for relief from health conditions, whether it's from San Francisco, or whether it's from the Bay Area, or whether it's from Lake County, or whether it's from Potter Valley, or whether it's from Shasta, that we can be good neighbors. We obviously can't solve everybody's problems, but knowing where the resources are, knowing what a realistic solution is, really takes the stress off of people that are already incredibly stressed by the potential loss of their home. And because of the fact that we have COVID, we have to come up with strategies that are different than the strategies of congregate housing, where you would create a rescue resource at a school or at a senior center. You know, we're very, very concerned about COVID transmission. People are concerned about COVID transmission. So one of the things that we have done in our community is to bring in a lot of sleeping bags. At least that way people can be protected to some degree from the elements of the weather and have something a little softer to sleep on. We're in the process of acquiring tents. The tents that we've had have mostly been distributed at this point, but we're reaching out and trying to accumulate more tents. If you have a community that does a lot of camping, you might ask them to self-identify with you if they have a tent that they can spare or share because their house has been spared, and they realize that there's someone in the next neighborhood or down the street that might need that resource. In other words, categorizing and cataloging your resources ahead of time really is a very valuable thing to do. We have been working with our service clubs and working with our school districts and working with public health and our agencies for many, many years. And because of that, we have a high level of trust developed between ourselves and our partners. And so we're able to reach out at a moment's notice and say, I have a family that needs housing. I have a child that has a health issue. I need someone COVID tested really quickly. Having that kind of framework and relationship set up on a 365-day basis when you're in a rural network, in a rural community, really helps you when all of a sudden there's an urgency or there is a sudden shift in the winds that is bringing smoke into your community, a certain level of urgency because COVID is raising in your community. And many of us are dealing with the fact that we know that our schools are closed. And so we have children at high risk because their parents have to go to work and kids have to be home by themselves. Setting up phone networks where you can ask a neighbor to check on your child is a very helpful thing to do. You don't want it to be a stranger. You want it to be a trusted family member, you know, a grandparent, even if they're out of the area, an aunt, even if they're out of the area, a neighbor who you have known since that child has been little that is reliable. And you want that child to also have that phone number and that ability to reach out, so that if something happens with your phone connection, if something happens with cellular, very often cellular will work outside of the area when it's not working inside the area. So we have gone through things where we have had events. I can remember with 9/11, where in my family's case, my family was in New York. My nieces and nephews were able to reach me in California, but they could not reach their mother, who was 10 miles away. And we're going to see that kind of disruption again. And so it's good to have a plan B when you live in a rural community, for not only phone numbers that you can reach to let people know that your child needs to be talking to someone or that you are safe, not just locally, but also more regionally and outside of the area. On our webpage, which you can Google Mendocino Coast Children's Fund, you will find a list of hundreds of resources for distance learning, for working with your children, for emergency numbers, for health, for nutritional services, for mental health services, and we're constantly updating that list. We suggest that you look at that list and you think about within your own community creating a similar resource. It might be through your family resource networks. It might be through your school districts. It might be through a church group. But the more information that you can share, it might be your Facebook group up in Covelo, which is a very active group. It might be through one of your other affiliations. But what you want to do is cross-pollinate your community with information. You want to share it as widely as possible. Facebook is a wonderful resource for people who use Facebook. There's several good Facebook groups up now for, Danila has a wonderful, amazing site up. There's a couple of other news sites that have come up recently. I think Mendo Fever is one, Mendo Voice is another. It's really, really important that you stay in touch with what is happening right now rather than waiting for it to show up in a newspaper, because very often having that information at your fingertips right now is going to help you make a life-changing decision to vacate your home or to leave an area or plan a path to safety that you can't do if you aren't current. There are many resources available for you on the county site. There is COVID information, and there is also NICSI alerts that you can sign up for, and it's important that you do this. The NICSI program you can reach through the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. I think that Matt was just on recently talking about resources. I'm just trying to re-emphasize that because you may not have heard that presentation just before I was on. And it's important that you hear this. And sometimes we have to hear things 2 or 3 or 4 times before they sink in. The other thing that I want to talk to you about, which is critically important, is no one is going to come rescue you. You have to be planning for yourself what you and your family are going to do. Our small, courageous, committed, volunteer fire departments can no way on their own reach you in time if there is a fire. You have to be ready to go. The sheriff's department will do the best they can to alert you, but we are a huge county and we are very, very understaffed. And many of you live up roads that take a very, very long time to reach. It's not like being in a suburban area or an urban area. It's not like being in Santa Rosa, where my family was just evacuated from. It's not like being in some of the areas in Napa that are a little bit more closely related to each other in terms of access. So you have to be planning, and that means having a go bag ready. And a go bag is simply the most essential things that you need: your medications, your eyeglasses, an extra pair of shoes, a warm sweater, water and food for yourself and your family, a charger for your phone, a flashlight. You can go on just about any site and just Google in go bag, and you can find a huge amount of information. Danila and I will make sure that information is posted on Facebook for you with some very small and accurate lists of how to do this and do it quickly. We have unprecedented heat right now, and we have 2 more months of fire season, and you have to be planning as if there will be a fire, not maybe, but when. And the worst thing that will happen is that at the end of the 2 or 3 month season, you'll have some food that you need to put back on your shelf that you didn't eat. You'll have some medication to put back in your medicine cabinet that you didn't use. It's important that you contact your health providers and get extra medication. Do not be counting on the fact that if you're down to a 3-day supply, you're going to be able to get a refill to get you through the first week or 10 days of a fire if we have a fire in Mendocino County. We have pharmacists and nurse practitioners and health people on our children's fund board, and they advise us. I've received a notification from my own health provider. I'm a Medicare age, telling me to refill my prescriptions now. I don't think that there will be any problem with you getting refills. You should have at least a 2-week supply on hand, particularly if you have a pre-existing health condition. The importance here is that you have to take responsibility in a very proactive way for the outcomes that you are going to be facing over the next 2 to 3 months. We want you to do everything that you can to keep your immune system up. The healthier you are, the better chance you have of surviving COVID if you have an exposure, of surviving the seasonal flu season that is opening up right now if you have an exposure. If you're someone who believes in vaccination, and I'm not trying to have that debate here, please get yourself vaccinated. If you're somebody who does not believe that that is a safe route for you, please take whatever precautions you need to take to protect yourself from possible contamination from other people. Masks are incredibly important. The county has just brought in thousands of masks that are the equivalent of N95 masks. I believe they are going to be distributed over the next week through public health and through the clinics. If you are somebody who is at all sensitive to smoke, you should be reaching out to public health and reaching out to the clinics in your community to get a mask now. These masks are not certified for medical use within a medical facility, but they meet all the other requirements of an N95. And right now, the biggest risk to you, to be quite honest, is smoke. Smoke can do lifelong damage to your lungs. It can do lifelong damage to people in all kinds of ways. And so anything that you can do to protect yourself from smoke exposure is really important. And I will be posting things on the Children's Fund Facebook page and also sharing them with Daniela about what you can do to protect yourself from smoke. The other thing that is a really effective solution to smoke mitigation is to buy a box fan, a 20-inch box fan, a 20-inch furnace filter that is rated at 11 or higher, and very simply attach that filter to the back of the fan, either with duct tape or with a bungee cord. Put it in a closed room where you and your children sleep, and make sure you're pulling all the smoke out of that room. A lot of our housing is inadequate. A lot of us have housing that has a lot of transmission of smoke that comes in through single pane windows or windows that are not well caulked or houses that are not well insulated. You can't change your housing at this point, but you can do everything you can to try and protect yourself from smoke coming into your home. So those are the kind of tips that I'm offering to you out of our 28 years of working in these situations. I also want to tell you that there is absolutely no reason for any of you to ever feel ashamed for asking for help. You help the whole community when you help yourself. The healthier you can keep you and your children, the healthier the entire community can stay, and the sooner we can get through the things that we're facing. There's a list of resources on the Mendocino Coast Children's Fund page. There's a link right to Healthy Mendocino. You can also go to North Coast Opportunities. You can go to Danila's amazing page. I think it's Mendocino Action News. She will be able to tell you and chime in with that. I don't have that name memorized, I'm sorry. If you use Facebook, just please try and get yourself enrolled in the Facebook pages that are sharing responsible information. Try and do everything you can to focus on your own well-being right now. It will help everybody.
Hi, everybody. So just wanted to touch on some generators and emergency power backup with all the fires and PSPS power events. I've had a lot of customers coming in for emergency backup generators. One of the first and most important things to consider is what type of generator do you need? Do you just want a regular generator that's going to run at full RPM and maybe just be for emergency backup only? Do you want a generator that's going to adjust its RPMs and be good on fuel? Or do you need a generator that adjusts its RPMs and also produces good, clean power for a TV or a computer? Your generators that just run at a full RPM, they're great for running a pump or a skill saw or something like that. But if you're running a TV or a computer, it's very important that you have that clean power. And you get that out of an inverter generator. So it's very important. The other thing to consider is how many volts do you need? Do you need to run just your household items, lights, computer, fridge? Those are typically all 110. If you needed to run your dryer or a well pump, those are typically going to be 220. So important things to consider before you go in for a generator. The other question I get a lot is how much power do I need to run my house or these certain things? So it's a real easy thing to figure out. Take a refrigerator, for example. You can open the door of your refrigerator. On your door is going to be a silver tag, and it's going to tell you that that refrigerator runs at 5 amps. So you can take that 5 amps, multiply it by the 110 volts, and you're now going to know that that refrigerator takes 550 watts to run. So you could run that with a 1,000 watt generator. If you wanted to run more than that, you would take each 75 watt light bulb and add that to the 550 watts. And whatever you come up with at the end, that's how many watts you need. So if you come up with 3,000 watts, then you need a 3,000 watt generator. Now, another thing that you can do is learn to manage your power. Managing your power is you might come up with 7,000 watts that you need to run your house. But during that time, you may only need to use your coffee maker once. Your refrigerator is only going to kick off every once in a while, and you don't need your lights all on at the same time. So you can learn, okay, I can go a 2,000 watt generator, and I know that I have 2,000 watts that I can use before I overload my generator. The other question that I get a lot is how do I hook the generator up to my house? The safest way is to call a local electrician and have them put in a separate breaker panel with a switch that will lock out the power. So when you plug your generator in, there's no chance of any power going back to the main line to hurt a PG&E worker or somebody that's working on the power lines. The other way that you can go is if you only need to run your refrigerator and a light, you can simply put it in a safe place in the backyard and run an extension cord into your refrigerator. Not as safe, but if the power was only going to be out for one day, you can easily do that. It is important to have your generator in an area where there's a lot of ventilation, in an enclosed environment, and also make sure that there's no open windows by that generator. If you had it out on the side yard and your window was open, it's going to suck the exhaust fumes right in to your house. Very dangerous. A lot of the new generators come with CO2 sensors, but if it's outside and the CO2 is inside, it's not going to sense that and turn itself off. That's just there if somebody accidentally starts one in the garage or in the house, it will turn itself off. Let's see. The other thing to consider in your generator is your runtime and fuel usage. So if you just need to run your well pump and it's not going to be for a long time, you can just get your economy style generator that's going to run at its 5,500 RPMs the whole time, which is kind of your louder generator when you hear your neighbors and wah. It's going to go through a lot more gas. If you go to a generator that's got a voltage regulator on it, where you can set the voltage regulator and it will bring your RPMs down to just put out the amount of power that you need to use to run the lights or to run that refrigerator. That's going to take that runtime from 8 hours up to 14 hours, depending on which generator you have. But if you're going to have power outage for a week or 2 weeks like we did last year, it was pretty important to have a fuel efficient generator, as there was gas stations not able to pump fuel. It was quite the mess. So I believe I've covered the basics with generators. Clean power for TVs, there is no exception for that. I can't stress that enough. Even with a voltage regulator, it takes about a second for that generator to adjust its power. And if your RPMs change on that generator, the power output changes, which is very bad for a TV or a computer. Your inverter generator, it's always going to produce that right amount of power no matter where the RPMs are.
Free to call us at 462-1959 during the pandemic, because we are not open, but we are monitoring our calls on that number. So as I mentioned, volunteers are fortunately plentiful in times of emergency and disaster. And many of them are government affiliated, as my pie chart here shows. Not all of them that are listed on this pie chart, which I did not make, but it was provided to me. But not all of them am I aware of taking place locally, but many of them are. We have CERT, Volunteers in Prevention, Medical Reserve Corps we don't have in Mendocino County, but they're not, I'll be talking a little bit about something very similar. And Neighborhood Watch, I hope we have a few of those locally. CAL FIRE, I think, may have a volunteer and prevention program. And then moving over to National Service, Corporation for National and Community Service often mobilizes AmeriCorps and CCC teams and other AmeriCorps volunteers in disaster response and disaster preparedness, as well as RSVP, which is a retired senior volunteer program, which is for volunteers over the age of 55. And they also are supported in disaster response by the federal government. Business volunteers, that is really growing in population. That would be, for instance, like one of our local businesses will give, like, you know, I'm just saying off the top of my head, like Savings Bank or Community First Credit Union, maybe our grocery stores. I think Kohl's has a strong volunteer program, Home Depot. But you often, groups of volunteers that all work together want to do something to help, and they usually want to do it together. Community and faith-based, case service clubs, they're often very prepared to respond in disaster and may have something very specific that they want to bring to the table as far as volunteer service goes. Faith-based groups, many churches, synagogues, they want to also volunteer as a group or have their own activity that they're sort of sponsoring and promoting. Ham radio office operators, which we do have here in Mendocino County. Animal rescue groups, that's very popular for animal evacuation and sheltering. And there are a lot of organizations that are for the most part, all volunteer organizations, such as Salvation Army, Red Cross would be another one. So all of these already organized or affiliated groups will be looking for something to do that they can help in times of disaster. But there also are a lot of people which may be in a group, but they are kind of, in addition to whatever their like service club may be doing, they may still want to do something more with their family or their friends or on their own. And we call these spontaneous volunteers. And that is hundreds and hundreds of people, because everybody wants to help, and that's a wonderful thing. But what we don't want is all of those people not knowing where to go to find out what to do. And so they go to their local fire station or their local police station or the emergency operations center. So we want to keep all of that, all of those individuals away from those locations. So after the Loma Prieta earthquake, talk started about, hey, why can't we have some kind of an organized system to managing these volunteers? And then after 9/11, that became more formalized. And what was a result of that talk was an emergency volunteer center, or an EVC. And that is people who are trained management or volunteer management professionals that have taken training in managing spontaneous volunteers and have a system and all the forms and know what they're doing. And so in Mendocino County, NCO Volunteer Network was identified to serve as an emergency volunteer center in the case of a large disaster. And we do that in partnership with the Emergency Operations Center because we need them to communicate to us what volunteer needs are. So NCO Volunteer Network has, if we want to include this current pandemic, we have managed 5 EVCs starting in, or actually maybe even 6 if you went to the '08 fires. But then in Valley Fire in 2015, followed by the Clayton Fire, and then in 2017, the complex fires, which we had closed down our EVC, but then within a couple months had to open it up again. And then the current pandemic. So we've had a good amount of experience. These pictures are from the Mendo Lake complex fires, very busy, very rewarding, but a lot of work. And so this is an in-person EVC, which is really the best way to run an EVC because we can ask for identification, and it feels a lot better sending a volunteer out to do work in the community when you've at least, checked that they are who they say they are. And also a process of mobilizing volunteers in emergencies is determining if they are fit to volunteer, because if it's a wildfire, they may have just lost their home, yet they feel like, okay, I can't go back to my home, I want to help. But it's probably not the best thing for them to be helping. They need to keep care of themselves emotionally. So the process is such that there's a lot of steps before you actually get your volunteer assignment. So we can look for red flags. So that's the best way. But sometimes you have to do your EVC virtually. And in the Valley Fire, we did do it virtually. And that was a little scary, but everything went fine. I think that's another good example of human kindness and concern, is that we had no one that was in it for the wrong reasons, and no issues, at least that I'm aware of, or that were reported to us. And in the current pandemic, it's been the same thing. We've been mobilizing volunteers virtually, very little contact for obvious reasons. So that is the EVC process. Now, one of the things that the majority of people that we see in the Emergency Volunteer Center are interested in doing is helping out in a shelter. We'll have people that say, I'm a cook, I work at this restaurant and I would like to be a cook at the shelter, or they have real specific talents that they can bring to a shelter. However, shelters are most commonly set up by the county Health and Human Services, and they just have them running until Red Cross arrives. So county employees, they're trained in setting up a shelter and getting it up and running. American Red Cross comes in to assist, and they have their regulations that they have to follow. And those are that those working in the shelter be background checked American Red Cross volunteers. So if any of you out there that are listening, have something you can really bring that's of value, and or even if it's just a heart to serve in a shelter, please seriously consider, go to the American Cross website, think about becoming an American Red Cross volunteer. It'll be so helpful to our community. And they have an online sheltering training, and I do work a little bit with them, but I don't know the complete process for becoming a volunteer. But I'm sure someone will be willing to help you out if you just go to the website and get that started. And here are 2 very happy American Red Cross volunteers. I mean, who wouldn't want to, feel that good after you're done with your volunteer service? So, but if you feel that is not where you want to serve, and you are interested in learning, not only just serving in an emergency, but learning about coming to the aid of your family, your neighbors, your friends in a emergency, or further educating your community in disaster preparedness, you might want to think about becoming a CERT team volunteer. So CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. Sometimes I like to say the T is for training, because it is a very intensive and very thorough disaster preparedness and response training. So if we do have a big earthquake, you can see down in the corner that's the CERT training folks learning about cribbing. So you could use that education that you learned to help someone in your neighborhood that may be trapped under some heavy piece of material. In the other picture, you can see they're practicing some search and rescue, I believe. I wasn't at that training, but that's what it looks like to me. There's a search and rescue exercise. You learn how to search a building with no lights. How would you search a building to see if there's survivors when there's no electricity? So these are things you don't think of, and there are proper ways to do that. I just want to point out that the gentleman there in the Army fatigues or camo, he will be following me with a little bit of disaster preparedness, and he is Mendocino County lead CERT trainer. His name's Mike Carter, so you might want to tune in for that. It should be excellent. A lot of times we hear with the CERT training that people feel like they're not capable. Well, everyone is capable. And I want to share with you next a little video, a promotional video that I think communicates better than I could, just how valuable the training is, and that everybody can help in times of emergency when you have CERT training. So I'll just get that started.
We teach people confidence. The confidence that should a situation arise, that you have the capabilities to react to that situation.
It's really empowering to know that you're what's going to be there first, you're what's going to comfort the people.
Our volunteers are made up of really everyone. They are some of the most amazing people that you'll ever meet. They're all different, and they all want to be part of our CERT program for many different reasons.
Everybody brings a skill. That's the beauty of CERT.
So my last thing I'd like to say about CERT is all of our CERT team members are background checked. That comes in super handy, because anytime you need to do something where you might have to go into someone's home or do something that involves children, we need background checked volunteers. So if you're already background checked and you're already associated with Volunteer Network, fantastic. So that's a really great thing about CERT as well. A new program that we have at NCO Volunteer Network that was really picking up speed before the pandemic, but we still are managing to provide these trainings virtually, is Listos. And Listos is a culturally sensitive disaster preparedness training for Spanish-speaking communities in Mendocino County. Ours is specific to Spanish-speaking communities. And we really need volunteer trainers for this. It's very important that for the continuation of the program that we have volunteer trainers. So if you're bilingual and you think that disaster preparedness training in the Spanish-speaking communities is something that appeals to you, please consider taking a Listos basic training. And at that training, you'll learn more about becoming a volunteer trainer. And I have a video about that too, because we really want to see this effectively implemented in Mendocino County. So I want to really give any viewers an idea of what this program is.
Listos is an individual and family public education program that focuses on disasters and emergency preparedness. It started as a program targeting Latino populations, vulnerable populations. We have different cultures within the Listos program. We try to make the curriculum as culturally relevant as we can. We try to incorporate the whole family unit. We encourage children to attend, seniors in the home, parents, caregivers, anybody that's willing to learn a little more in a conversational setting. We talk about what the risks are. Depending on the region that the participants live, we have different risks. This conversational learning allows for the participants to learn through their own experiences and sharing, information sharing, knowledge on how to have a family plan, how to be better prepared for a disaster or for an emergency, how to have evacuation plans, how to know where your utilities off, why are you going to shut them off, and when do you shut them off. Talk about how to utilize fire extinguisher training. Why do we have smoke alarms at home? Why do we have carbon monoxide detectors? We talk about the importance of emotional support in the aftermath of a disaster. Listos means ready in English, and it's exactly what we want to do with our community. We want to have them ready for that disaster. Listos is the introduction to preparedness, really is that first step. And it engages people to then want to learn more about their preparedness. We want to encourage folks to visit our website. You can find resources there, programs near you, how to sign up for a class. It really is a resource tool for everyone that wants to implement the program in their area. It's a very basic curriculum, grassroots, that I really encourage everyone that can to participate in such a rewarding program.
Lisa!
And I'll be sharing more information about how you could find out about the local CERT program too when I'm finished with my presentation. So one other way that you can volunteer is as a disaster healthcare volunteer. Now, for the most part, this opportunity applies to people in the medical field, but you don't have to be in the medical field because like in our current situation with COVID-19, we're doing testing, but we need people to do some administrative tasks associated with that testing. And so if you have administrative skills, you can sign up as a disaster healthcare volunteer. And it's for like chiropractors, pharmacists, veterinarians, all aspects of the healthcare field. And we have deployed disaster healthcare volunteers to Paradise and to other counties, because that's when you do apply, you can list the counties you're willing to serve in, or you can just stay in your own county if you want. And currently we are recruiting and managing contact tracers that are considered disaster healthcare volunteers. That's a really good example. Many contact tracers do not have a medical background, but they're certainly fit to serve as a disaster healthcare volunteer. And to sign up, you would go to healthcarevolunteer.ca.gov. And the last thing I want to talk about is VOAD, which is Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, also commonly referred to as a COAD, which really kind of makes a lot of sense, Community Organizations Active in Disaster. The Mendocino VOAD meets, currently we've been meeting monthly. Our next meeting is October 6th at 3 o'clock. It'll be Zoom. But it's organizations such as, we're on that pie chart, really, faith-based, government agencies, nonprofit agencies, anyone who has something to bring to the table in the event of a disaster would attend a VOAD meeting. We connect there, we further talk about further training, and we iron things out and get to know each other so that when an emergency or a disaster does occur, we know where the resources are, and we know who to talk to, who the specific person is that knows us and knows our needs, and we know their needs, and we've already connected. So we can make those connections and serve the community much quicker when we meet regular as a VOAD. And we are also part of the Northern California VOAD. So we have regular meetings, which one of our CERT members, or maybe even a few of our members do attend regularly for our surrounding counties. So we're informed of what's happening in Sonoma County right now, what's happening over in Lake County right now, if we're all in communication with each other during blue sky times. So that is also the Mendocino County VOAD. is also organized by NCO Volunteer Network as far as the logistics, setting up the meeting time, keeping the minutes, that kind of thing. Let's see if I got anything else. So this here is just our contact information, which I'll leave up for a few minutes. But before I wrap it up, I'd like to talk about the pandemic. This is a very different disaster, and it has very different needs, which we couldn't have anticipated prior. So, whereas if it's a wildfire, we know we're dealing with, the loss of homes, flood, same thing, damaged homes, damaged communities. The fallout from COVID right now with the isolation or with sheltering in place is food insecurities, people not feeling connected, lonely, suicide, increase in suicide and mental health issues. And due to the fact that so many of our volunteers, our faithful, dedicated volunteers, are seniors because they have the time to volunteer. They have a lifetime of skills to contribute. Those volunteers, especially with our rising cases of COVID-19, positive cases, aren't as willing to come out and volunteer. So I would just encourage anyone listening that if you have time that you can hook up with, like in Ukiah, with plowshares, with Meals on Wheels deliveries, please call NCO Volunteer Network. We're establishing an errand running volunteer opportunity so that people who are isolated at home can have household goods brought to their home. We are establishing a really awesome friendly visitor program that's called Good Company. It involves some nutrition aspects and disaster preparedness aspects to make sure that those homebound individuals are ready in time, in time of disaster, during the current disaster already. But we really need volunteers. They're becoming scarce. We also need bilingual contact tracers. If like you have that, like kind of, detective kind of spirit and like solving a case and can and are bilingual or even monolingual, please contact us. We could really need contact tracers. We also need volunteers to help us promote just the importance of wearing masks in businesses. Anytime someone enters a small business without wearing, or a business without wearing a mask, we're putting those businesses at risk or of having to pay fees, which some of them really can't afford at this time. So we really need help getting word out and distributing masks and making sure that everyone in our community is adhering to the mask regulations when they're out in town. So please call NCO Volunteer Network. There's the number there, 462-1959. You can visit our Facebook page, it's NCO Volunteer Network. We have a Facebook page, Ukiah CERT, and we also have a Facebook page, Listos Mendocino. And any of those places you could find information on volunteering. And you can go to our website, volunteernco.org. And if you select Mendocino County Community Volunteer, we will contact you to find out, the community volunteer is our friendly name for a disaster volunteer, and it means you'd like to help out with COVID-19 volunteer activities, and we will get back in touch with you and after you've registered, and we will help you find the perfect volunteer opportunity for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about what the Community Emergency Response Team is. It's a program to educate people about disaster preparedness and give them some training to better assist their family and their friends in an emergency. It trains in basic disaster response skills, such as fire safety, which can be as simple as how to operate a fire extinguisher, light search and rescue, disaster medical operations, and disaster psychology. This is to help you and your family prepare for an emergency. How to CERT assist? CERT members can assist others in their neighborhood or workplace. following an event when professional responders are not immediately available to help. In any major disaster, the emergency responders are going to be overwhelmed initially. So having CERT training, you can help to assist people in your family or your neighbors until the professional responders can finally respond. CERT members can also support emergency response agencies by taking an active role in emergency preparedness training projects and disaster response in their community. We are a force multiplier. We assist, but we don't replace the regular emergency responders. A little bit of history of CERT. In 1985, Mexico City had a major earthquake. The response was examined by the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. They found out that people who were untrained who came to volunteer weren't aware of what they should be doing, and over 100 volunteers were killed aiding the victims. So in 1986, the Los Angeles Fire Department started a pilot program to train citizens for emergency response. They basically developed the initial CERT training program. In 1987, they had the Whittier Narrows earthquake. After the Whittier Narrows earthquake, they realized that they needed a much bigger CERT program, so the pilot program was extended to include the entire fire department. In 1993, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, expanded the program to other types of disasters and offered the program nationally. They looked at what the fire department had set up for earthquakes and realized it could be used for fires and floods and any other kind of major area disaster. The program is currently offered in all 50 states, in 3 territories, and also in 6 other countries. What happens in an emergency? The emergency response in a disaster, the police address incidents of grave public safety. Firefighters suppress major fires. The emergency management service personnel handle life-threatening injuries. Lower priority needs are met in other ways. Some of the other ways are by using CERT personnel. The CERT personnel can go out and report what they observe to the emergency management personnel. And then they can also assist with some of the less life-threatening or less fires, less major fires. CERT can be a force multiplier, assisting but not replacing the professional services. So what is a CERT member's responsibility? Your first responsibility is to yourself and your family's safety. Once you are sure that your family is okay and your neighbors are okay, then you can assist emergency response personnel when they request it. The CERT team members do not deploy unless they're requested, and this is for a CERT team member. We have some people who take the CERT training and they take it solely to use for personal and family safety. Other members end up joining local teams, and we have teams in Brook Trails, Fort Bragg, and Ukiah at this time. How do they respond after a disaster? The CERT members treat injuries, they extinguish small fires, locate and turn off utilities if it's safe. They can conduct light search and rescue to find survivors, and then they help survivors relieve their stress. We have 3 basic levels of CERT training. The first level receives the basic training for personal emergency readiness. The second level receives basic training and attends additional training when offered. And the third level receives the basic training and then joins an organized CERT team for additional training, exercise, and functions. What's the course curriculum? We have disaster preparedness for 2.5 hours, which helps you develop your own plan on how you will handle a disaster, including evacuations. We talk about fire safety for 2.5 hours, what you can do to prepare your home so that it's better prepared in the event of a fire. Disaster medical operations is 5.5 hours. We teach you things such as how to splint a broken arm. In the event that there's an emergency, there may only be one ambulance available, and you have a person who's having a heart attack and a person who has a broken arm. The ambulance is going to the person who has a heart attack because that's a life-threatening situation. But you will be able to figure out a way to splint the broken arm. We talk about light search and rescue, how you can go about looking for people who are survivors and then rescue them from the situation that they're in. We talk about disaster psychology for an hour. What you're going to see in a disaster are things that you probably hope that you will never see, but you're going to have to learn how to cope with them and how to assist people who are also victims of the disaster. There is a 2.5-hour discussion about CERT and terrorism. We talk for the CERT organization for 1 3/4 hours. That talks about and explains the development of the CERT teams that are assigned to the individual local communities. And then there's a final review and simulation that is 2.5 hours. What kind of additional training do we have for CERTs? You have advanced first aid. We have animal issues and disasters, the automated extended defibrillator training, community relations, CPR skills, debris removal, emergency communications, donations and distribution management, shelter management, special needs and concerns, traffic and crowd control, and we also talk about volunteer management. The basic personal protective equipment for CERT members is a helmet, a pair of goggles, N95 masks, gloves, both leather work gloves and non-latex gloves, and a backpack. We provide all of this equipment to people who become CERT team members. Additional equipment is provided as funding allows. You would have to have your own work boots. How are disaster service workers protected? If you become a CERT team member, you'll be certified as a county disaster service worker. The CERT team members are protected by the Good Samaritan laws, the Volunteer Protection Act of 1997, and as a state disaster service worker, you are covered by workmen's compensation laws in the event that you are injured. What kind of non-disaster roles do CERT members become involved in? You identify and aid neighbors and coworkers who might need assistance. And you'll notice it says mapping. What mapping is a system where either CERT team members or people who are trained in CERT go about their neighborhood discussing safety with their neighbors and also finding out where the water shutoff is, where the electric shutoff is, where the gas shutoff is. So in the event of an emergency, you don't have to spend time walking around the house trying to find all these locations. You'll have a map that shows where they are. We distribute emergency preparedness materials. We do things such as the Heroes of Health and Safety Day, the Willits Airport Day, and we set up a booth and we pass out emergency preparedness materials. We will also do safety demonstrations, such as demonstrate how to operate a fire extinguisher and have people actually use a fire extinguisher. We staff first aid booths at some special events. We also provide parade and event route management. We assist local law enforcement agencies with the parade and route control. The training program is presented free of charge. It's actually funded by the Federal Emergency Management Administration. All course materials are provided by the Office of Emergency Services. The course is a total of 21 hours of instruction that is normally given over a 3-day period. And what we have been doing recently is doing 3 consecutive Saturdays. During the COVID We have actually suspended our training because of the amount of hands-on that's required, and we can't do it while we are in the COVID period. The course schedule is flexible. You can talk to the instructors, and there may be a way that we can set up a schedule that will be other than the 3 Saturdays. We need a local training facility for the presentation, and it has to be big enough that we can seat all the people there and have an open area where we can actually do some of the hands-on training. So, CERT members are trained to assist their family and their neighbors in emergencies. They can also help to prepare their neighbors for disasters. CERT team members can assist the local community emergency services by supplementing them and performing duties that support the emergency services. This can be free trained personnel to perform their functions. If you have a question about other things with CERT, you can find the Mendocino CERT website at www.mendo.cert.com. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Great, thank you for the opportunity. And we pretty much covered the first slide there, so I'm going to move on. So I am director of the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council, and our mission is to inform, empower, and mobilize county residents to survive and thrive in a wildfire-prone environment. And since part of what we do is helping help people get prepared for wildfires, I'm going to go through a little bit, kind of a two-half program. I'm going to go through what we do now, so you know what we're doing and what's available, and then focus in particularly on the community involvement part of what we do, that hopefully you will all get involved in yourself. So through our mission, we do operations, including in developing neighborhood fire safe councils, which is what I'm going to talk about later. We do outreach and education. We've got a lot of material up on our website and more being added almost daily. We plan and implement large projects countywide. We do it through funding from a huge array of sources. As you can see on the screen, we get significant help from the County of Mendocino, from the Community Foundation, and from numerous other grantees. We just got another little grant from Pacific Gas and Electric yesterday. Through those things, what we do are, we manage large road clearing projects and fuel breaks. So we've got several of those going on now. I like to say there's like two major ways we can make big things happen. One is by landing a lot of grant money and bringing in a large machine and crew. And the other is by getting a whole lot of people with shovels and rakes in neighborhoods, and you can accomplish the same thing in the same amount of time both ways, and we need to be doing both. Our largest project at the moment is called the Ukiah Valley Fire Fuels Reduction Project. We've cleared, I believe, this fall, summer and fall, something in the line of like 11 miles of road on the east and west sides of Ukiah. We're about to move on to doing off-road fuel breaks coming further into fall. We are doing similar program in Anderson Valley and a lot of work up in the Brook Trails area and on Williams Ranch Road. So we have crews working in a lot of different places. We have a community chipper program, which is a good one to know about. We are doing a lot of chipping right now. The chipper program's up and running. We have our own chipper. And we organize those primarily around neighborhoods that organize themselves. So if you get a bunch of neighbors together and do a bunch of defensible space clearing, a huge problem with that is then you then have a bunch of material that you either have to pay for somebody to chip, which is very expensive, or haul. And so if you organize your neighborhood to do that, we can come do that for you in a group, in a kind of a day event. We also have a brand new program we're in the process of rolling out right now to provide defensible space for income qualified folks who are either senior or disabled. So we just closed actually the round of applications for that, and we're beginning the assessment process and beginning to work on that project. We are working on a series of videos with folks from the UC system on how to harden your home and prepare for fires. You'll see those showing up on our website over the next month. We have a ton of other ongoing programs, including you can order a reflective address sign to help emergency responders find you when it's dark and they're from outside of the area. You can order those on our website. We have lots of literature, including a brand new version of the Living with Wildfire in Mendocino County that you can see on our website. We have a membership program. We assist with community projects and mitigation planning. We're working with the county right now on helping to craft an abatement ordinance. We help form neighborhood councils, as I mentioned. Lots of other programs. One exciting one to look out for coming up. I think our first program is October 27th. There is going to be a Mendocino County Fire Safe Council radio program on KZYX. We'll bring a lot more in depth information. Here are the sort of summary of the 4 things we organize around trying to get people to do. One is home hardening. Quite related to that is defensible space. One of the things that people tend to think incorrectly about wildfire is that homes are mostly damaged when fire comes sweeping through the area. Actually, most homes that burn down in wildfires are burned down from embers drifting from a fire that can be happening as far as a mile away. So home hardening is the practice of looking at your home and making sure that its surfaces are as unfriendly to embers as possible. And there's a whole process to go through, starting with your roof and then your vents, and then clearing defensible space around your home, making sure particularly in the first 5 feet around your home that there's nothing flammable if possible, because embers tend to hit the corner of the building and come down and pile in those corners. So if there's nothing for them to burn there, you substantially increase the likelihood that your home will survive a wildfire. I'm not going to dwell. Those 2 topics are being tackled in a discussion later by Michael Jones from the UC system, so we're not going to delve into those in depth today. But there is a ton of material on our website and available about those generally. Same with personal and family planning, and that means having your emergency plan, having your emergency routes mapped out, having your to-go kit, having a plan for your pets, etc. We have a ton of material about that, and you can Google Ready, Set, Go, and CAL FIRE's got a tremendous amount of good information about that as well that's easy to get to. What I'm going to focus on today is something that's more specific to the Fire Safe Council, which is neighborhood organization. And neighborhood organization is all about creating your own neighborhood Fire Safe Council and getting that going in your area. Why should you do that? You should do that for a lot of reasons. One is that wildfire is a community event. Your home is as vulnerable as the home down the road from it. As I mentioned earlier, most fires start from embers. So if the house three doors down is not maintaining itself, has gutters full of things that are going to catch fire and dead brush around it, if a spark lands and catches that, then that house will catch the next house, and that house will catch the next house. Once it's going, then radiant heat kicks in. So your neighborhood is safest when you prepare together and help look out for people who need help tending to the fire safety of their homes. And that's kind of what I just talked about. Embers, radiant heat, and direct flame contact are the ways that fire can get to you. And embers and all of those can come from a hazard that was nearby in your community and not directly on your property. Houses that are closely spaced are particularly vulnerable to radiant heat. So again, you have more of an incentive. Helping neighbors prepare helps you protect yourself. Also, it is a community effort to get in and out of when there are evacuation warnings or hazards. So you want to work together as a community to make sure that the access routes that you and your neighbors will need to get out are clear and accessible in an emergency situation. And those are the same routes that emergency responders will need to be able to get to you. We urge people to form neighborhood councils in their individual neighborhoods for a number of reasons that we'll get into, but one of the main reasons is that when we land grant funding and do these major projects, they tend to focus around people who are already working to help themselves. So when we want to do a road clearing, if there's a neighborhood council that is organized that road so that they can help us do the job of getting landowner permissions and alerting people about how to mark things, that makes it so much easier to do the work in that neighborhood. That means that that's the neighborhood we're going to go to first. So you bump yourself up the priority tree by having done some work to organize your own neighborhood. Let's see, and I already mentioned a bunch of reasons why neighborhoods that are organized are more likely to have a positive outcome. You're also likely to have a much better psychological outcome if there is a disaster in the area, knowing that you've done what you can to help your more vulnerable neighbors through that. So benefits of belonging to a neighborhood council include a bunch of things. First, we give you some benefits. A lot of neighborhood groups have old-fashioned phone trees, which are wonderful, but also really prone to breakdown. It's great to have contact information and know how to get in touch with your neighbors and have a plan for doing that, but there are modern automated systems that you can use to send out a message to everybody and have it repeat until people get it, that are far more effective than relying on the next person in the chain to be home and available when an emergency happens. So we have bought, on behalf of Mendocino County Neighborhood Fire Safe Councils, a large charity rate discount to one of those programs, and we can help you get set up with an automated program for that. One of the big things that I'll focus on is our neighborhood leadership meetings. When your neighborhood has a council, the folks that are running that get invited to our leadership meetings, which are actually pretty exciting and great exchanges of information. And what we discover happens is if the different neighborhoods kind of inspire each other with when they talk about the projects that they're working on. So it's motivational. I already mentioned that you kind of get bumped up the priority list for when we have funding for projects. You also find out about them first. Folks who have neighborhood councils, like for example, the senior program that I mentioned and disabled program, that word about that went out first to our organized neighborhood groups so that they had a chance to get folks in their neighborhoods enrolled early. We can also provide one-day insurance for neighborhood groups when you organize your own work parties. So we can help with your liability on that. We can also provide a fiscal sponsorship umbrella. We're a 501c3. So if you're affiliated with us, we can help if you want to apply for your own grants or do fundraising. What does it take to get a neighborhood council going? It can be a little or a lot. Each neighborhood council is unique. Your neighborhood council might do an informational potluck gathering and distribute some literature once a year. And that's good. If that's as much as you do, you can invite speakers and we can help with that. You can do tons more. You can develop neighborhood tours and help each other assess what the hazard areas are and how to address them. You can develop phone trees and hazard maps and neighborhood shutoff locations for emergencies so that people know where to turn off the gas if their neighbor's not home, for example. We talked about the phone tree. Escape routes can be super specific to neighborhoods. In your neighborhood, perhaps the best escape route is going to be through some particular person's backyard if you have to go west. Or so it's best to sort of sit down and really think about that in a very specific manner for where you are. And also to identify the closest available safe havens in case the main route out of your area is blocked. Where can you gather safely together? You can hold classes. You can plan work parties. I've seen a couple of the neighborhoods on the east side of Ukiah have done work parties recently and can accomplish a tremendous amount in a short period of time. And you can work together to document and have ready on the shelf projects that you need funding for, so we have those ready. And you can also, if you want to get more formal, you can become a Firewise USA recognized network. We have a number of those in the county, and that kicks it up to yet another level. So you can do a little bit, you can do a lot. We have the whole range of them in the county, and they're all great and doing good work. And I think with that, I've talked through the time for the presentation.
All right, this is Danila Sands with Mendel Lake Complex Fire Relief, a disaster resource center in Mendocino County. We are doing a series of emergency preparedness webinars. Today, we are speaking with Mike Carter. He is one of the Mendocino County ham radio operators. And he's going to give a presentation on ham radios and emergency times. Mike Carter, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Go ahead and start. Welcome.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Mike Carter, and let's talk a little bit about ham or amateur radio. Amateur radio is a popular hobby service that brings people, electronics, and communication together. People use ham radio to talk across the county, around the world, and even into space, all without internet or cell phones. It's fun, social, educational, and can be a lifeline during times of need. Amateur radios come from all walks of life. Whoop. You have doctors, students, kids, politicians, truck drivers, movie stars, missionaries, and even your average neighbor next door. They are of all ages, sexes, income levels, and nationalities. Universal appeal. Wrong way. There are hams who have only a very basic knowledge of radio and electronics, all the way to people who are communications technicians and actually build their own radios. There are even hams on the International Space Station who use ham radio to talk to school children. Every time that they send up new astronauts, one of them is always a ham radio operator. What's the appeal of ham radio? You can communicate from the top of a mountain, your home, or behind the wheel of your car without relying on the internet or a cell phone network. In times of disaster, when regular communication channels fail, and that's your cell phone, landline phone, and internet, hams can swing into action and assist emergency communications efforts and working with public service agencies. The amateur radio service in Mendocino County provided communications capabilities for hospitals and medical facilities, and also for shelters when the Redwood Complex fire disrupted normal telephone and internet service for almost 3 days. Ham radio can be a lifeline in emergencies. The Federal Communications, the FCC, created this service to fill a need for a pool of experts who could provide backup during emergencies. In addition, the FCC acknowledged the ability of hams to advance the communications and technical skills of radio and to enhance international goodwill. As I said before, you have hams who can actually build radios. We have a lot of hams who do experimental communications using radios and actually advance the state of radio communications throughout the world. There are 3 levels of license that give you increased capabilities at each level. The basic license is for short-range voice and digital radio. The general license is for short and long-range voice, digital and Morse code. And the advanced amateur are all modes and frequencies on the ham radio spectrum. Why do you need a license? The basic license is all you need to have to use short-range radio bands and talk to local hams. Licenses are issued for 10 years and may be upgraded at any time. The use of a ham radio without a license can cause you to have fines of up to $25,000. How much does a license cost? The basic study materials for passing the FCC and getting your initial license usually costs less than $40. The cost to actually take the test is currently $15. In Mendocino County, we offer free classes every spring, and they're done by a group of the local ham radio operators. Or you can also self-study using materials online, or there are books that you can purchase that will help you to study how to get your basic, general, or advanced licenses. Once you have your first license, most hams start with simple equipment, and this grows over time. The usual cost for a handheld radio is less than $200, and that gets you start talking to other hams. You can also find used ham radio equipment at flea markets and on the internet. And we actually have what we call a swap net every Thursday night on the ham radio bands here in Mendocino County, where people can search for or trade equipment that they already own. The ham radio has many bands that allow you to talk to other hams locally and internationally, depending on the radio type and your license level. If you have a basic license, you just have local radio communications. If you have a general or the advanced licenses, you can talk worldwide. Many of the ham radios allow you to listen, but not transmit on local police and fire frequencies. During the fires that we have going right now, I've been listening in on the CAL FIRE frequencies so that I know where they're dispatching fire trucks and where the fire is located, and I can relate that to my friends, family, and neighbors. In Mendocino County, we have a linked repeater system that allows you to communicate anywhere in the county and also portions of Lake County. It's a system of 5 repeaters that all talk to each other, and they're owned and maintained by the local ham radio operators. They're available for any ham to use. We have had people up here on vacation driving through Mendocino or Lake County, and they can get on those frequencies and talk to other of the local hams up here. Using the linked repeater system increases the distance a person can talk using a handheld or mobile unit. Most of the handheld units are fairly low power so that they don't have a lot of range, but by using them to connect with the repeater, you can talk anywhere in the county. There are also non-linked repeaters that are more area specific. You can use those at any time also. During an emergency, a fire, flood, or earthquake, ham radio operators can listen to the emergency services and determine the location, nature, and the scope of the disaster. Ham radio operators can share this information with other hams, with their local community to keep people informed about the incident. I have neighbors giving me calls all the time to find out where the smoke is coming from and where the fire is. Hams can also be asked to volunteer to assist when the normal forms of communications are disrupted. When that happens, the countywide repeater system is used by the Office of Emergency Services, and hams have to use other ways to transmit their traffic. That's one of the reasons why we have the standalone repeater system. When the countywide repeaters are being used, use the standalone systems, or you can even do messages station to station. I can pass a message from where I live in Laytonville to someone who's in Willits. That person in Willits can pass it to someone who's in Fort Bragg. The person in Fort Bragg can pass it to somebody who lives in Point Arena, and we pass messages that way. There are many modes which include voice, digital messaging, Morse code, and there's even a method where you can send email directly via a radio when the internet is down. Radio equipment. Your basic mobile radio for use in your home vehicle. That's what is shown on the top right of the screen. You will also need a speaker and an antenna, and if you want to use it in your house, you need a 12-volt power supply. Almost all ham radio equipment runs on 12 volt because it's designed to be used in vehicles. You can also get the portable handheld battery-powered radio, which is shown on the lower right of the screen. How much do they cost? A basic battery-powered handheld 2-meter radio can be between $150 and $200. That's a good initial radio which will allow basic communications, but the range is limited due to its power. Those radios normally run a maximum of 5 watts so that they have a very light power supply and it doesn't drain the battery. For mobile communications, a basic radio antenna and speaker will cost approximately $200. Those operate directly off the vehicle electronic system because they're 12-volt radios. Better equipment will cost more, so the amount you spend is up to you. This is not a really cheap hobby. It can cost a lot of money if you have the money that you want to spend on it. What's the best way to learn about amateur radio? The best way is to talk to another ham face to face. Hams take pride in their ability to teach newcomers the ropes and get started in the hobby. Now, you'll see the word Elmer. A long time ago, there was a ham by the name of Elmer who helped people. And over time, people would start asking, who's your Elmer? Who is assisting you? It's basically a radio mentor. One of the other places you can look is the Amateur Radio Relay League website. That's at http://www.arrl.org/home. The Amateur Radio Relay League is the national organization for all ham radio operators. If you have any questions at all, you can normally go on that website. And if you can't find the answer on there, you can find how to contact somebody who knows the answer. One of the other places you can go is the Willits Amateur Radio Society. The WARS website at http://w6mm.club/index.html. Although it's called the Willits Amateur Radio Society, we have members from all across Mendocino County and even Lake County that are part of the club. Or if you desire more information, you can contact me at mgmcarter@outlook.com. So amateur radio is an interesting hobby that allows you to communicate with other hams in the county and with the appropriate license worldwide. It also provides a means to remain informed in emergencies and also to provide emergency assistance when necessary.
And I'd like to start with about a 4.5-minute video, just a sort of an introduction to some of the things that the Red Cross does. It's a little bit, it's pre-COVID, so I'll talk a little bit more about how a few things have changed for that. So Danella, go ahead and play the video, please.
American Red Cross, this is Kim. Can I help you?
You can't imagine what it's like to lose everything like that. Well, maybe you can, because you're the Red Cross. For me and my daughter, there are just no words to describe how we felt.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Chris Johnson.
Bill Bullock.
Sydney Lee.
Hi, Sydney. Nice to meet you. So we have an adult male and a small girl standing over on the other side of the street.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Chris Johnson, Sydney Lee from the American Red Cross. How are you? Are you okay? What's your name?
Elisa lost all her things in the fire, and you had a teddy bear to give to her. That meant so much to her.
Everything is gone. Everything.
Well, we'll see what we can do to help you. I have a couple more questions here that I need to ask about your immediate needs. Do you have a place to stay tonight?
I've got no place. We just moved here and we don't know anybody. I have a car. I guess we could sleep there.
Don't worry about that. The Red Cross can help you find a place to stay.
We wouldn't have had a roof over our heads if it hadn't been for you, Red Cross.
Ready?
Yeah.
You gonna keep this guy warm?
Yeah.
Qué linda manito que tengo yo. Qué linda la manito que papi me dio. Good night, honey.
Good night, Daddy.
Whether striking suddenly or after hours of anticipation, a disaster can disrupt the life of a community.
One empty too.
Yet while the disaster may be a surprise, the American Red Cross disaster response has been planned long in advance. Following a disaster, many people left temporarily, even permanently without a home, turn to the Red Cross for assistance, support, and comfort. Often the process of recovery begins at a Red Cross shelter. A shelter's main purpose is to provide people a safe, temporary place to stay during an emergency until they can return home or find assistance in making other housing arrangements. Shelters vary according to the size and scope of the disaster, the number of people affected, and their needs. The Red Cross will establish shelters in schools, community centers, places of worship, or commercial buildings. Regardless of the disaster, the Red Cross works together with local government authorities, including emergency management officials, police and fire departments, and public health agencies, to assure the safety and welfare of the people in its care. Most important to the success of a shelter is the commitment by all Red Cross workers to quality service. This means workers ensure the safety of the shelter, respect the culture and background of all clients, provide fair and consistent services, enable them to make other living arrangements, and use the material and human resources of the Red Cross wisely.
If you give a client the feeling that you have addressed their specific needs, then that will automatically give you that feedback that you have truly provided or assisted them.
Our whole objective here is to empower people so that they can get back on their feet and get back to their normal life.
It's a challenge, but it's also what's so rewarding. Is that at the end of the day, I'm looking around at all these people who have made it in and hopefully gotten the help that they've needed, and I've had something to do with that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch over to a slideshow here. Find the magic button. Share screen. Okay, so are my slides showing now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Anyway, so just a few notes on that. We'll have time for questions at the end, of course. So feel free to post any questions you have about the video. Started off showing one of our disaster action teams, which is probably most of our responses. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. These are the home fires. You know, the Red Cross, we have people on standby 24/7, 365. Usually get by the fire department if somebody needs a place to stay. And just also, well, as I'll be talking about later, just emphasizing the partnerships. You know, they talked a little bit about that. You know, as much as I'd like to say an organization the size of the Red Cross can do it all, we rely very heavily on community partners, government partners, and other people in the community. So we'll be talking about that more as we go along. So I'd like to start with a quick word from our sponsor here. This is our official Red Cross mission statement. There's two things I want to call people's attention to is that we rely very much on volunteers. We're about 90% volunteer, and this is at all levels, pretty much anything in the Red Cross, probably all the positions that you saw in the video that was very likely volunteers. And of course, we don't receive any government funding. We rely entirely on donations. And I'll just talk about this in the context of our prepare, respond, recover cycle. And if you notice, the prepare arrow is quite a bit bigger than the others. You know, people think about, you know, the big disasters that happen and, you know, the shelters close, people who go back to their homes. And for a lot of people, that seems like the end of it. But for us, it's just the beginning of a new cycle. You know, we're right back to the preparation. You think about everything that it takes to be able to open a shelter anywhere in the county, you know, within a few hours, you know, and someplace, you know, close to Ukiah or Willits, it might be as little as a couple hours from the time that we get a notification, the time that we're actually able to receive people in a shelter. You know, on the coast, probably would take a little bit longer. It, you know, it could take several hours just to get certain places in Mendocino County. But we'll be elaborating more on all these concepts as we go along. So on the preparation phase, we talk about basically 3 concepts: to make a plan, build a kit, and be informed. So I know you're all wondering, well, what kind of plan, what kind of kit, and what kind of information do I need? And so a good place to start with that is by understanding some of the hazards that we might be preparing for. And again, just a reminder, the upper left corner that representing one of our disaster action team responses, that's primarily what I do in the Red Cross. I'm the disaster action team coordinator for Mendocino and Colusa counties. And then of course, you know, floods, if you happen to live in Ukiah, we do get flood occasionally, tsunamis, very real danger on the coast, and earthquakes. You know, can happen here. We do have a couple of major faults. We have the Miocmas fault running through Ukiah and Willits. It can create about a magnitude 8 earthquake. And of course, the Cascadia subduction zone off the coast, which is the one that really gives us all nightmares, which could cause a 8 or 9 earthquakes going on for several minutes and followed by a tsunami of anywhere from about 40 to 120 feet, depending on where you are along the West Coast. So as the beginning of your preparation always starts with an understanding of what it is we're preparing for. And hopefully you'll come up with a better plan than this one. So making a plan, we don't have time to go into too many details here, but the redcross.org website does have a lot of information you can download, a lot of details. But basically, as you're making a plan, you want an evacuation plan for home, for work. You want at least 2 ways out. You know, what goes into your kit, depending on what you want to take with you. And if people are sort of scattered when the disaster happens, maybe at school, at work, shopping, whatever, you might want to think about a meeting point for the family outside of the home if people can't get back to the home. An out of area contact can be really useful if communications are down. You manage to get through to somebody who's lives in another state or something. If your extended family knows to call that person to find out how things are going, it's a way to let everybody know you're okay. And think about any special needs, any medical for your family, including non-human family members. And then really important to practice, review, and update your plan. So what goes into your kit? Well, just think about some of your normal essential activities, you know, what you need to keep going. You know, basic supplies, you know, things like food, water, special needs, medicines, wheelchairs, walkers, any special things for mobility. Depending on your situation, you might want to have more than one kit, you know, one in your home, a larger one in your home, maybe a smaller one in your car. You know, think about how many days your kit lasts, and that depends in part on the nature of the disaster. I mean, a home fire, smoke alarm goes off at 2 a.m. Your primary use is just to get out, get everybody out safely. And following a major earthquake, you might be sheltering in place in your home for a week or 2. And of course, remember your non-human family members. Think about how you're going to communicate, how you're going to get news. What if the utilities are off for several days? For some people, it might just be an inconvenience. For other people, it could be life-threatening. And of course, be informed, and that includes having reliable information. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I've got the last slide has some phone numbers and websites, and just basic safety skills like drop, cover, and hold on during an earthquake, stop, drop, and roll in the case of a fire. And seems like a no-brainer, but once everybody's out, stay out. We see, like I shouldn't say too often, because once is too often, but people are injured either trying to fight a fire in their home, or everybody's out and then somebody goes back in to try and get something, and nothing in there is worth your life. So just once you're out, everybody's out, stay out, call 911. And then learn some basic life-saving skills, CPR, the defibrillator, basic first aid skills, and that might include pet first aid if you have for your non-human family members. And as we move into the response phase, as we saw in the video, where the Red Cross works very closely with government and other community organizations, things like fundraising, managing in-kind donations, things like clothing donations. And of course, before you can respond, your preparation is a huge part of that, especially if you're a member of a responding organization. If people are not prepared to take care of themselves, if they don't know if their family is safe, they're probably not going to be very effective as responders. So job number one, the first step, of course, is always being prepared, being organized. And we have a lot of opportunities, both with the Red Cross and our partners, as I talked about, those managing donations. The Red Cross is not really prepared to take clothing donations, but fortunately we have community partners who are prepared to take on some of that kind of stuff. Providing transportation for individuals, connecting people with resources, and if you want to do more and actually get trained to offer specific services like sheltering or training, have all those options. And again, the fundraising, for a lot of people, the shelters close, evacuations are lifted, and for a lot of people, people go home, and that seems like the end of it. But for us, thinking back to that prepare, respond, recover cycle, for us, it means restocking our shelter trailers, restocking our supplies. Our trailers pull into the shelter full, they pull out half full, and this is where the cash donations become very much appreciated. And donating money seems kind of impersonal, but it lets us buy exactly what we need when we need it. And it also helps the economy of a devastated community, because we're usually purchasing from local businesses. And as the recovery cycle, people start returning home, and the evacuations are lifted, starting on any repairs, rebuilding, applying for government assistance, contacting their insurance company if they have insurance, starting the process of replacing personal and household items, managing financial issues. And again, this is where, not only the Red Cross, but our community partners come in, have a huge role to play here. And then, of course, once the recovery is done, we're right back to starting to prepare for the next disaster. And so just a few words about our local Red Cross. As I mentioned, I think we're about 90% volunteer, and this is at all levels. The person managing a multi-county disaster response may very well be a volunteer. It will be a very well-trained and a very experienced volunteer. So our responsibilities has nothing to do with the size of our paychecks. It really comes down to who is the best person to handle the job. And a few statistics so far in Mendocino County this year, our 14 disaster action team responses, primarily to home fires. We did have that gas line explosion in Ukiah. Actually, that happened while we were operating a shelter for the LNU complex fire in Lake County. Had responses in Fort Bragg, Ukiah, Willits, 34 families, helping a total of 71 people so far. And this is in addition to our normal, the shelters that we've been assisting with in Lake County and Mendocino County for the recent fires here. And so opportunities, basically everything that we've talked about so far is done by volunteers. So if you have 5 to 10 hours a month, we'll help you find a rewarding opportunity. Some of the preparation things, planning, again, what does it take to open a shelter within 2 or 3 hours anywhere in the county? Having the people and supplies ready to go, knowing the tires on the trailers are pumped up, maintaining those community partnerships, and of course, keeping everybody up to date on their training. The response, again, the home fires, the disaster action team, shelters have to be staffed, they have to be supplied. We use technology to keep everything moving. And then in the recovery phase, we have follow-up casework, working with people after the disasters for those who've lost homes, and again, distributing supplies, distributing cleanup kits, and sending damage assessment teams out, depending on the nature of the response. So this is the last slide. If possible, I'd like to leave this up during the question period. Up at the top is our local Red Cross office in Lakeport. You're welcome to call that with any questions that you have. Redcross.org. You can download all kinds of disaster preparation information. We do have apps for mobile devices. You can go to redcross.org/apps, or just go to your app store for your phone or tablet, whatever you have. We talked about the importance of reliable information during a disaster, and a good source here in Mendocino County is the Mendocino County Sheriff's Facebook page. The next one, calfire.ca.gov, that's the CAL FIRE website, again, with reliable information on fires, depending on how busy they are. Well, it's usually updated at least once a day. The next one for river conditions for those in Ukiah, or if you're living in want to check on floods, it's actually a really nice little website. It shows you real-time river information, river levels, and it projects ahead, when the peak flooding is likely to occur. And these next ones, really important, the Mendo Alert or Everbridge. You can sign up to receive messages on cell phone, by email, your home phone. So there's the website for signing up for that, and Nixle alerts, which will go out from the Sheriff's Department for evacuations, updates, anything that might present a public safety issue and requires immediate response. So you can either sign up for all of Mendocino County alerts or just your particular zip code. And you can also go to the website at nixle.com to register.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right, well, thanks for the introduction, Danella. My name is Michael Jones. I am a forest advisor with Cooperative Extension. And today I'm going to be talking about home survival in wildfire-prone areas. So really think about design and maintenance considerations. I just want to acknowledge my collaborators, Yana Valkovic, Steve Quarles, who have been fundamental partners and really been the drivers of this research, this resource, and have been pushing the materials in the community. And our collaborators in other organizations, the California Fire Science Consortium and the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about and how we want to think about this is, and I should preface this saying that when we think about home design and maintenance, that for the purposes of this talk, we're focusing from the home out, right? So we're starting with the home itself, the structure, and then we're working out into the defensible space. So I'll talk about a little bit more, but so we're thinking, just remember, we're thinking starting at the home. So how do structures ignite? Well, we have three primary methods of ignition occurring during wildland fires. We have direct flame contact, where the fire burns to the home. We have embers, where the fire creates firebrands or parts of burning vegetation that are blown in the winds ahead of the fire, causing spotting or late touch structures. And then we have radiant heat, or we have the direct impact of heat against a structure, which can cause ignition as well. So these are all very important sources of ignition in wildland fires, and all things that we have to manage for and think about when we're creating defensible space and home hardening and managing to make our homes more resilient. But we know in the last few years with the recent fires that a significant portion of building ignitions occurred through embers. And so we're going to talk about how we can make our home more resilient to these embers. So what we have is simplify kind of the way we're going to talk about this. We think about the priorities of how we make our home more resilient. The first two, roof and vents, are critically important because those are very vulnerable to ember exposure. And we'll talk about each of these in brief detail. Then we have our vegetation, our defensible space. Arguably, vegetation defensible space is just as important as thinking about home hardening and how our structure is designed and maintained. But for the purposes of this talk, because remember we're starting at the house, working our way out, vegetation falls down under the largely important aspects of home hardening, which are roof and vents. But it's equally as important and must be as considered when you're thinking about this issue. And then we think about windows, decks, and siding. These are very critical elements of home design that are vulnerable to not only embers that are blown in ahead of the fire, but also through radiant and actual flame contact that occurs from vegetation near our home burning or other structures that are burning adjacent to our homes or from the wildfire itself. So these are kind of the criteria, and this is how we think about it and kind of how we prioritize how we are going to address issues in making retrofits or maintaining our homes. All right, so the first is roofs. In the red circle, we have basically our roof material, which is a Class A. We want to maintain Class A roof structure. It's very fire resistant. However, as you see in the yellow circles, roofs can have complexities. These complexities create vulnerabilities where things like litter or debris can accumulate, and embers will accumulate there as well during a fire event, and those can ignite. Those vulnerabilities can then, make their way through your roof into your home. So it's really important to think about maintenance of, even if the material and the quality of your roof is high and you just installed it and it's in really good shape, but if you have complex roof structures, that could potentially create vulnerabilities that have to be managed and maintained. Roof edges are critically important, right? These are spaces where embers can penetrate. Embers can get anywhere the wind's blowing, an ember can go. So if there's a space, an ember will find it. The surface of the roof may be Class A, but the under elements, the subsurface may not be, and they might be more vulnerable. That goes for roof edges that I mentioned. In gutter attachments and other attachments to the roof, gutters can accumulate litter. Different types of gutter materials can have different behaviors during fire events. Plastic gutters can melt. Metal gutters can take heat on your roof, as you can see in this larger image. So those are things to consider when you're maintaining your roof edge and your gutter structure. All right, next is vents. So when we think about vents, they're critical for our home. They create airflow so we can maintain moisture and the integrity of the home. And they just have really crucial roles, and they're everywhere, right? We have vents on the roof, we have vents under eaves, in the gable ends, in the foundation. So they're all over the home, and each of those is vulnerable to fire. And we know that the way they're constructed, oftentimes the embers can easily penetrate through those materials into the inner spaces of the home. And so a really easy retrofit that we recommend, and is something that you can go to Home Depot or a home store and buy material. Most vents today are constructed out of, old vents and some newer vents are constructed out of 1/4 inch mesh screening. As you can see on the left side, an easy retrofit is to reduce the screen size to 1/8 inch material, right? And just that change in dimension, the diameter or the size of the squares will do a lot to prevent ember penetration into that structure. If you want to take it to the next level, you can look at California Building Code Chapter 7A, which actually outlines specifically vents that are designed to be fire resistant. And so they have different constructions that either will create like baffling or maybe even heat sensitive foam release that will prevent embers from penetrating or shut down. Another thing you do is on red flag days, or if you're concerned and fire might be coming towards you, you can actually just put plywood or other material over your vents to actually screen them off. All right, so priority 3, we're thinking about our defensible space, right? The whole point of defensible space is to reduce the amount of vegetation around our home. Typically, we think about it being 100 feet. That changes when we have different types of vegetation structures, topography, and there's a lot of different variables. But for the most part, we're thinking about a 100-foot space. And we have 2 zones currently defined. We have the defensible space zone, which is at 0 to 30, or the lean, green, and clean, we like to call it. You want a really park-like structure, really clean, spaced out vegetation. Then we have our 30 to 100, which is our reduced vegetation zone. And the idea is that we're just changing the structure of the vegetation so that as fire moves into the vicinity of our home, that we change the fire behavior. Either we drop it out of the canopy or which slows the rate of spread down. We're doing something that we're reducing the amount of vegetation, and that fire behavior changes such that first responders or fire crews can get in there and potentially stop the fire, or even it puts itself out. And so this is a really important zone for managing fires when they are moving on, when the actual fire front or some kind of ignition has happened, maybe embers or something have happened out in that vegetation and the fire is moving towards you. However, we know that a lot of the ignitions that are happening, or the home loss or structural loss that we're experiencing right now, are embers blowing miles ahead of the actual flame front. So most of the time, we're not even seeing direct flame movement into a home or defensible space. Embers can just blow right through that and impact the home material, the material that makes up the home itself. And so we have to really think about these priorities that we're talking about. You have to make sure the materials that are blowing against that house or the materials that are being impinged on with embers are going to be resilient and well maintained to resist the damage that could be caused or catching on fire. But we're also thinking about if there's vegetation right up against our home, that creates a fuel bed that can then create fire and heat right against our home and bypass the defensible space. So what we are developing was recently signed into law by Governor Newsom under the bill AB 3047 is called a zone zero. And so essentially what a zone zero is, it's a 0 to 5 foot buffer that's created from the house 5 feet out. The idea is that you're changing the structure of the vegetation within this zone into a non-combustible zone. So that if embers were to land here, there's nothing for them to ignite, and then that heat or that flame contact is not up against the structure of your home, making it more resilient. Then you're still maintaining your zone 1, which is your 5 to 30 as your lean, green, and clean, and then your extended zone, your reduced vegetation. And so that's really this kind of key. We really think this is a key aspect of home defense and home hardening is the zero zone. What does that look like? It's a non-combustible zone where you've reduced the chances of flame contact through direct exposure, ember ignition of vegetation. And the idea is that it has to be implemented all the way around your home. Use rock mulch, hardscape, or some kind of well-manicured green, low-growing lawn or kind of vegetation structure so that if embers or fire were to approach it, there wouldn't be any continuity of that fuel and that fire would persist. And the focus is less on plants, not the types or what kinds of plants, but more on how we're placing those plants and how we're maintaining those plants, right? So this idea of having these foundation anchoring shrubs right against their home is not ideal for home hardening in defensible space. So we're implementing our best practices, right? In the top right, we have all that vegetation right against the house. The homeowners cleared it out. They changed the structure and they're still maintaining the beauty, the aesthetics of the home in a way that they are happy, but also increasing the home hardening or the resilience of their home. So when we think about fire resistant plants, do they have lists? Do we have recommendations? And the answer is no. There is no such thing as a fire resistant plant. All plants will burn regardless of how they are marketed. In this photo on the right, you see those were cactus that burned in the Tubbs fire. What's really most important when we're thinking about fire safe landscaping is maintenance. How are we maintaining that vegetation? We want to select low growing, open structured, low resin, high moisture content plants so that we don't have dense buildup of fuel and vegetation and a continuity of that fuel, which can ignite easily and hold fire against our home. And then we want to focus on, let's think about using native and drought tolerant plants that can be maintained fairly easily and are also kind of important ecological parts of the landscape. And again, the most important part about plants within the 0 to 5 foot zone and also within your 100-foot defensible space zone is the placement, where those plants are located. All right, just quickly, I want to mention that mulch is an extremely important aspect of landscaping. It helps to maintain moisture and all kinds of things that help our plants grow and protect the soil, but mulch burns. And so you really want to think about how you place mulch on the landscape, and maybe you're going to want to keep it out of that zero zone, that 0 to 5 foot space, because as you can see in the bottom right, that is mulch that caught fire from embers in the Tubbs fire. So that's just something to consider. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of it, but maybe you're thinking differently about how you're placing it in your landscaping. All right, so that's a quick overview of vegetation. Now we're going to look at priority 4, windows. Windows are really important because it's this complex figure on the left, but basically what happens is the car fire photo on the right is a really good demonstration. We have vegetation under the window that caught fire. That thermal gradient, the heating up of that outer pane caused that window to crack. But because this was a double pane window, the inner pane didn't crack. And so you did not lose the integrity of that window and created a pathway for embers or flames. And so maintaining high quality windows that are sealed in well and the double pane to have that thermal gradient is extremely important and will be very valuable in maintaining a resilient surface. Priority 5 are decks and attachments. So this can be fairly tricky and a very complex issue to address. But basically, you think about what a deck is, and it's really just another large surface area of combustible materials that embers were to land on could potentially ignite and carry the fire to your structure or your home. And so maintenance is extremely critical. You know, as you can see in this blow up of the picture on the right, we want to clean out litter and debris that accumulate against the home, but also maintain the quality of the wood. And maybe we're replacing some of the boards against the house with non-combustible materials, or we're doing foil tape like bitumen tape on the joists and areas to break up, again, that continuity of fuel, so that if fire were to catch the deck, or if the deck were to catch on fire, that fire is not burning into and directly consuming the home structure. Maybe it's being put out, or it's not building up a lot of heat and continuing to consume the deck. And also it's more resistant to embers if you kind of break up that fuel continuity. Another important part, I'm kind of sidetracking here, but is cleaning off your deck. So having natural fiber materials like benches or cushion chairs on your deck, those are very ignitable, and embers can land on those, catch them on fire, and then create a source of heat and flame that then can catch your deck on fire. So I'll talk briefly about this at the end, but I call them my red flag day BMPs, or best management practices, and one of those is to remove combustible items from your decks or structures adjacent to your home. Really important is to not store material of any kind on your deck. Basically, on the photo on the left, what you have is kindling pile that embers will get to and will create conditions that will make it hard for your deck to resist catching on fire. So I don't think you need to maintain the deck on the right. That's a pretty austere and a dramatic example of a very well-maintained deck space, but certainly not on the left. You don't want to store a lot of wood or flammable or combustible materials. Another type of attachment that we want you to think about are fences. And so fences can act like wicks and carry fire from one structure to another. And so one thing that we can do is to break up, again, that continuity of fuel, and maybe we're putting metal gates or some kind of different material against our homes to break up that fence structure, so that if fire were to move along the fence or embers were to catch that fence on fire, they're not going to ignite the home structure. Our last priority is siding. Siding is really important to maintain as well, because we're thinking about embers or landing on the siding. You may have heat burning up, you may have heat impacting the siding, or you may have direct flame contact. So maintaining healthy siding is really important. Additionally, within that 0 to 5 foot defensible space, that non-combustible zone, or zone 0, however you want to call it, we're maintaining that horizontal 5 foot clearance. But another important aspect of that is maintaining a 6-inch vertical clearance, because what's happening is that if you see the top middle photo, that's the underlayment and the underside of the siding on top of the cinder block stem wall. And so what could happen if there's vegetation that is accumulating in that space, it can burn up under the siding. In the photo on the right, you see what happens is the fire is penetrating through the overlaps of the boards, through the lapping, and actually burning the wall from the inside. If you saw the other side of that photo, you wouldn't even really see most of that flame. And so we want that 6-inch clearance as well, because that way, if fire does get in there, there's a space that prevents those flames from reaching the siding, because that is definitely a more vulnerable area. So remember that zone 0 is a 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone, but also has a vertical component of that 6-inch spacing. And so if you have grass there, or if you have vegetation, you got to maintain it and keep it mowed and keep it low and keep it green. All right, so take homes here. Just kind of key points that some of them I mentioned, some of them I haven't, that it's great to think about. I always find this fascinating, and something really that I think about but don't really recognize is that we don't fight earthquakes, we don't fight tornadoes, and we don't fight hurricanes, but we fight fire. And it's clearly, it's not working the way we are doing it right now. It's not a sustainable model. So we have to adapt, and we have to build smarter. We have to become fire adapted and think differently about how we build our homes, where we build our homes, and how we live on the landscape in a fire adapted ecosystem. We know that the majority of homes in the last few years have been lost by embers. And so we want to really implement that defensible space, the home hardening, and critical 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone. Fire safe landscaping is possible. That includes beauty, safety, privacy, and saves water. And that's totally up to your objectives and goals as a landowner. You can make it look however you want. You just want to try to maintain as best you can in that non-combustible zone. And again, I'll reiterate that placement of plants is key, and maintenance of those plants is essential, right? You can have a shrubby plant that's very green, but if you let it get big and old and senescent, it may build up a lot of woody fuels that create higher fire intensity conditions. So you have to make sure those plants are maintained in a way that they are more less susceptible to embers and more resilient. All right, and then I mentioned it, but one thing that we just had, this was a major success for my colleagues, who have been pushing for this implementation of this into the definition of defensible space is that non-combustible zone. You can look it up. It was just signed by Governor Newsom, AB 3074. All right, home design, maintenance, and construction can be more important than fire-resistant building materials. And that's just saying, like, you can have a redwood sided house as long as you're maintaining that material, or maintaining the vegetation. It can be fairly resilient to embers. It doesn't mean you need to build a cinder block bunker. You can still have some design elements in your home as long as you maintain that material. And then poor installation and lack of maintenance is certainly an extreme vulnerability in these products, right? So no matter what material you use, if you don't maintain it and it builds up vegetation or it builds up litter, or the material is, you know, the coatings that protect it are flaking off or breaking or cracking, those are all vulnerabilities that you have to maintain. And regardless of what the material is, they make the house or structure more vulnerable. All right, so last thing I want to say is we have our red flag BMPs that I just mentioned, our red flag day best management practices. And so what I was talking about before, this defensible space, home hardening, the vegetation management, that's things that we can think about and implement year round. We can always be doing work on that. We can always be thinking about how we're going to make our home more resilient and how our landscape managed a little bit better. And these red flag day BMPs, and this is my personal approach, but here's what I think we do on red flag days or times where we high fire risk. So I mentioned it before, but one really important key is to move combustible items away from the house. So this is, you know, lawn furniture or chairs with cushions, natural fiber doormats or things that are up against the house, a barbecue with a grill. All of these things can be easily moved away from the house under red flag conditions. A broom with straw bristles is a really awesome ember catcher that can ignite easily and impinge your house with fire. And so we're thinking about, you know, this is my house, this is before red flag, and I just did this last weekend and actually today, which was a red flag warning in Sonoma County. And so this is what it looks like right now. And it's very extreme, but what I'm doing is I am removing that possibility of creating additional sources of material that can catch fire. Close, if you're leaving for the day for work, or if you are leaving because you're concerned that the fire is getting close, make sure all your windows, pet doors, and skylights are closed. These are all vulnerabilities that embers can easily get into if they're left open. And then a really cool idea that I like to do and that my colleagues, we all do, no matter where our home is, whether it's in the urban or the rural environment, is that we put out ladder. You can see in that photo in the back corner of the house, there's a ladder laid out against the house. And then we have connected hoses on my steps. In the shade is a hose hooked up to the faucet or buckets of water. And this gives resources that if a fire were to come through your area and fire professionals were to show up, you've provided them resources that makes it easier for them to defend your home. And if I have a side gate, I make sure that's unlocked and open so they can get in there easily. And I create a space where they would feel comfortable and safe trying to defend your home. So that's thinking about, that's before the fire gets there. In case of evacuation, in which we're emergency evacuation because the fire is threatening our home or it's very close to our community. Of course, we have our go bags and we're thinking about all the things, having all our effects and all our animals and everybody together. But there's another really important thing to think about is, you know, if you're under evacuation and you have an escape route that maybe it's windy conditions or maybe the fire's already burned through some of the community, you may have to get out of your vehicle to make that emergency route accessible. And so make sure you cover up. You need to have long sleeve pants or long sleeve shirts and pants that are natural fiber, so cotton and wool, to cover up, boots, good boots, hat, face coverings, and leather gloves, so that if you need to get out of your vehicle, you can easily kind of be protected from some of these extreme conditions. And it's always valuable to bring a tool. You know, maybe if you're out in a rural area and you need to clear roads on your driveway, a chainsaw, or maybe if you're in an urban environment, you know, something like a handsaw or a shovel if you need to push up out of the road. So thank you for your time. And one last thing before I kind of finish up is I'll say is that, you know, not all of us have 100-foot defensible space. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but really that can be tricky. I live in a relatively developed area and I don't have 100 feet around my home. And so what's really crucial is that you work with your neighbors to maintain that space as best you can. And if you're really close to other buildings and other structures that might ignite, then you should really prioritize what you're thinking about, how that material that's most exposed to that heat is maintained. So your sidings, your windows, and your gutters, and the roof, and the vents, and all the structures that might be most vulnerable to that closest heat source. And so maybe your vegetation is important, but you're really focusing on your home hardening because you have less control of vegetation and you're more worried about close ignition. So that's the kind of, we think about this from two different aspects, but both very critically important in both urban and rural environments. So I just did a brief skip across the pond of these resources. We have a ton of information on these materials, as well as all things fire in California on our website. Here's the link. It's ucanr.edu/sites/fire/, or you can just type in your Google search engine, UCANR Fire in California, and it'll take you to this website. And we have all these amazing resources that can help you out. Additionally, I am the forest advisor for the area. If you have questions or follow-up and site visits, or you want to talk about these issues further detail, you can always contact me at my email, mjones@ucanr.edu, or by phone at my office, 463-4495.
All right. So what I'm going to be talking about today is our solar powered battery backup systems. Just kind of running the full gambit of what we offer, and more importantly, what people can be thinking about for setting themselves up to be a little more secure if we, in the event of power failures and, the red flag warnings that we get with the power safety shutoffs, and just a little bit of peace of mind. So kind of what we're going over is, first off is system sizing, creating a load list, sizing the system, and then we'll kind of cover in short types of systems, which we have portable, standalone, and hybrid, and then we will have a Q&A. So first things when looking at trying to set yourself up with a battery storage or backup power, we kind of have to have a target. We have to know where we're going so that we can adequately size and build up to that. What I recommend is kind of like building out a list of items that you are wanting to have backed up. What is it that is everything that you would like to have if the power goes out, to keep yourself comfortable and safe. And then we then like to separate those loads into critical loads and non-critical loads. So what that is, the most critical loads we think of is generally life-saving equipment like CPAP machines, anything that you need to keep medicine cold, like refrigerator, freezers, things of that nature. We really want to focus on things that you can't live without versus things that you could live without, like maybe your television would be nice to have, but not necessary, things like that. And so we want to break those loads up so that we can size the system properly, and then also relegate your usage properly so that you're not left in the dark. And the other thing I want to touch on with that is how to acquire that information, because a lot of times the electrical information on your devices, a lot of times it's kind of difficult to find. And the way I'd like to kind of show a simple way to get that information off of everyday devices so that you're able to quickly and easily size the system so it's going to work for you how you want it to work. So where I like to start is, we determine first like what we want to use for our system, and then we determine a budget, so what we have to work with. So that way we can, see if we're going to be able to run all the loads that you're looking for, or see if you maybe have to like size it down a little bit to begin with to handle the things that you can't live without. So that's where we want to start off first. And what we'd like to do is create a load list. And I believe that I can click on this. Yes. So what we're able to do, there's a bunch of these calculators online. What you're able to do is go through and add appliances to a list, and it helps you kind of break down and break out what your usage is going to look like. So for example, we could put in here laptop computer. We've got one of those. It uses 65 watts. Surge rating is, we'll just say 100 watts. No DC watts. And you're using it for 5 hours a day. And so what we see here is you have your device, how many you have, what its power usage is, its surge rating, how long you use it for, and that spits out this number here at the end. So this is how much it uses at the end of the day. Another thing would be like a light bulb. So we have 3, say 40-watt light bulbs. Really no surge on those. And we're running those for maybe 10 hours. So what this can do is it lets you see exactly how much power you're actually going through, because a lot of times it's easy to get, think that you're not using a lot of electricity, that you're energy conscious. And, while you might very well be, the issue you can run into is some of those sneaky ones like light bulbs, they can get you over time versus just with the, the instantaneous use isn't very large. So once we go through, you can put everything into the load calculator, and it spits out a number that's the total amount that you use over a day. And so we can take that information, take it to a battery bank sizing tool, and we can enter in that number here and break down some of this information, like how many hours of, do you want to run, like what's your goals? Like if you want 1 day of runtime, do you want 2 days of runtime? And that's without any charging. That's just runtime by itself. So we can take that number and put it into there. We'd like to run for 2 days. And so it gives us an idea of how much power we have here. And so that's how we determine the size of the system that you're looking for. We take the loads that you want to run, and you can, and the best part is like with these tools, you can just play around with them to see, well, like what if I added this, what if I took away that, and get to that, to get to a number that is both what you would like to do and within the budget. This is kind of a simple way of determining loads. Like this is from my laptop. It uses 65 watts when it's charged and charging. So you can take that number, how long it takes to charge your laptop, and put that into the calculator. Another option are like these for appliances, like for refrigerators, for microwaves, air conditioners. You can get their energy guide, and what it does is it gives you, 387 kilowatt hours a day. And you just would take that number divided by 365 to give you your number. So that's roughly a little more than a kilowatt a day is how much this specific refrigerator uses. And so that's very important for putting together the size of your battery bank. So the different types of systems that are available, and this is kind of like the start, is a portable system. They're very affordable, they're portable, and they're easy to install. Usually it's just snapped together, maybe some assembly, really convenient. You can use it for emergency power, if, you know, we have a power safety shutoff, or if you want to go camping for the weekend and have some extra power, you can bring it with you. If you want to go camping and bring your CPAP machine with you, you know, you could do that. There's tons of products available on the market that are filling this niche. And, you know, they're all relatively similar, and they're really kind of convenient. They do have a limited capacity. You're not going to really be able to integrate it into your existing home system, and the expansion on a lot of these systems is slim to none. But for, you know, basic power, you know, keeping the light on when there is no power, they do a really good job. The other type of system that it is kind of pretty common is a standalone system. They can have substantial backup power just depending on how much batteries you're using. They're expandable. They are a lot of times integrated into your home system, and they have some detailed monitoring so you can see how much you're using, how much, you know, how much power you have left. They're really good, really great backup systems, and can be customized to do a number of things. The cost is higher than a portable system. They don't charge when the power is out, and the installation can be a little bit difficult and could require a professional installation. But these systems are sometimes referred to as a UPC, or uninterrupted power circuit, and you're able to have a portion of your home backed up that never goes down in the event of a power outage, and they can handle some serious loads depending on the sizing, like running an air conditioner, running refrigerator, running well pumps. This is where we start getting into, you know, keeping critical things moving if the power is out, especially for people who are remote. These are could be a very good option for them. And finally, the hybrid systems, these provide substantial backup power. They're, again, expandable. They're fully integrated into your home system. They have detailed monitoring available. They also have the ability to charge when the power is out. So if we have a power safety shutoff and you don't get power for a long period of time, your solar is still charging, and it's integrated with selling back to the utility if you would like to do something like that. They are the highest cost types of systems, and they are difficult installation, and we highly recommend a professional install a system like this. But these systems are batteries, inverters, and solar panels, and they all work together to be able to provide you with serious and substantial backup power.
So again, my name is Kelly Basil. I'm from Blue Ribbon Pets. We do grooming, boarding, daycare, and behavioral consultations. And today I'm going to do a presentation on emergency preparedness for your pets. We're going to talk about the definition of what an emergency is and give some examples of that, how to identify emergencies, make a plan for them, how to train your pet for those emergencies, what to do during the actual emergency event, and then what to do after the emergency. So first of all, we need to define what an emergency is, and this is going to apply to both humans and pets. An emergency is a serious, sudden, unexpected, often dangerous event or situation requiring immediate action. And from an emergency, we have two perspectives that we're going to be looking at today. One is the perspective of a human, which could be an intruder into your house, a vehicle accident, a flood, or a fire, such as we've been having lately in our area. From the pet perspective, though, again, remember, an emergency is a serious, sudden, unexpected, often dangerous event or situation requiring immediate action. So from a dog's point of view, and I'm going to be referring mostly to dogs because that's the main component of my business. So a dog, a car backfiring, a gunshot, an appearance of an intruder in the home, a windstorm, a tree falling down, these can all trigger to the dog an emergency response. So what happens during an emergency response, it triggers the amygdala to trigger the fight or flight response. That tells the dog, you need to decide right now, is this event going to be a good event or a bad event? You have to decide right now if you're going to live or die. At that point, they're incapable of rational thought. It's simply a life-saving choice that genetics has told them. If you want the species to survive, this is what you need to do. So again, from the dog's point of view, if they've triggered their flight response, they need to create distance between them and the threat. So we have genetics that's responsible for that, which is millions of years, or maybe not millions of years, thousands of years of evolution for the dogs that has said new events are capable of killing you. But now we have socialization of a puppy that says, you know, let's see what we can do to override genetics. Let's expose you to new humans. Let's expose you to noises. Let's expose you to new situations and teach you that these things that might be fearful in a wild animal are not necessarily something to be afraid of. But what happens if we miss that socialization period? What happens if a dog grows up without the benefit of good genetics, without the benefit of good socialization? Well, now we come to the training aspect. What can we do to teach our dogs how to be better in a scary event so that they're safe, others around them are safe, and we're safe? And again, what we think is scary is absolutely, totally, and completely irrelevant. We are looking at this from the dog's point of view. What we perceive to be normal doesn't matter, because it's not us that we're dealing with, it's the pets that we're dealing with. So we always want to focus on the animal's perspective, not our perspective. So when we're looking at emergencies for our pet, we want to identify different types of emergencies when we're making our plan. What can affect our pet? They can be attacked by another animal. They can be in a car accident. That's happened to several pets here in this county recently, where the owners were driving a car. There was a car accident. The dog took off. Some have been found. Some have not been found yet. But again, that event was an emergency. It was a serious, sudden, unexpected, dangerous event or situation, and they had to take immediate action. Their genetics told them, you need to decide right now if you're going to live or die. If they're not going to fight it, then they're going to flee from it. So that's what those dogs did. They had the accident and they took off. So keep that in mind when you're making your plan for your different emergencies. So today we're going to talk about plans on how we as humans can manage 2 emergencies for our pets. The first one is a medical emergency. The second one, which we've all used or all had need to discuss recently, is evacuating either our home or our business. So in our medical emergency plan, the first thing that we can do is we can take a pet CPR or first aid class. We can make sure that all of our pets are current and up to date on their veterinary care. Have they had their yearly exam? Are they current on their vaccines? Are they on heartworm preventative? Are they on flea and tick control? Do we have copies of our medical records? If our pet has been diagnosed with a health condition, do we know what that condition is? Do we know at what stage they are in that condition? And if they're taking medication, what is it? How much of it is it? And when do they need to take it? And then we need a medical first aid kit to be able to deal with medical emergencies until we can get our pet to a veterinary professional. We can also practice taking our pet's vital signs. Not only will the veterinarian need to know that if we happen to call for a phone consultation, if we can't go in right away, or maybe we don't need to know if our pet needs to go right away. What is their normal pulse? What is their normal respiration? What is their normal temperature? Practice doing an exam on your pet. Help your veterinarian be able to take better care of your pet and teach your vet how to do these weird and invasive and unusual things that we as humans think are just fine, but from an animal's point of view are invasive to them and they're scary. And again, a scary situation, fight or flight, that's their response. So we don't want them to flee. We don't want them to bite and cause a hazard to themselves or others. We want them to understand that sometimes humans do really weird and bizarre and scary things. Here's an example of an emergency kit that we have here, that I have at home, that I have in the horse trailer, that my daughter took to college with her for her horse and her dog. Just some very common things so that we can provide emergency first aid care until we can get to a trained medical professional. So now our evacuation plan, we need to decide when where, how we're going to evacuate, how are we going to communicate our evacuation need to our family members, to others in our community, to people in the area that we're going to go to. We need to have our evacuation kit ready, and we need to get our pet ready for an evacuation, vaccinations, microchip, medications, and get our pet trained to do an evacuation. Remember, an evacuation is an immediate need. It's a scary thing. We don't want to activate their fight or flight response. We want them to say, oh, you know what? This is a little bit different. It's a little bit unusual. It's a little bit exciting, but we've done similar things like this before, and I've gotten treats because of it. So let's all join in on this party and have this new exciting adventure instead of bite somebody and run away. So our evacuation kit for our pets, and have this ready ahead of time. You are not going to remember to get this when it's time to leave. You are not going to remember your pet's vaccines. You are not going to remember your pet's veterinarian. You're not going to remember your pet's name in some cases. During the October 2017 fires, when we started checking pets in that were evacuated, they were coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. We would get just the basic information from people, their name, address, phone number, the vet's name, and the pet's name. People were so traumatized, their own fight or flight response had been activated that they were incapable of remembering their address. They could not remember their phone number. In some cases, it was a total blank what their dog's name even was. So don't rely on your memory and having this information at your fingertips. Have it written down, have it photographed, take a picture of it, put it in your phone, put it in a hard copy somewhere, put it on a cloud, have it to where you can access it in multiple locations if there is an emergency, so you don't have to think, it just becomes an automatic response. Also have a list of contacts, your veterinarian's name and address and phone number. Most of the clients that came in could not even remember where their veterinary hospital was so that we could get animal records the next day. Also know where are you going to take your pet, boarding kennel, animal control shelter. Animal control in our county does set up an emergency evacuation center, and you will be hearing more information about that. And so you can take your pet there, but at some point they will be full. And if your pet has not been trained to rest quietly in a crate, if your pet is dangerous to handle, if your pet is unmanageable, they might not be able to take your pet into the evacuation center that they have set up because it's dangerous for them, their volunteers, their staff, and it's dangerous for your pet. So, but have a list of all those contacts. And here is part of my Go box. My actual Go box is much larger than this because I plan for the kennel, I plan for the dogs, the cats, and the horses. So these are some things that I have with me when I want to evacuate, or if I need to evacuate. I need to know that I have everything with me to set up a station to care for my pet without relying on, oh, do I have gloves? I need to find someone that has gloves. Oh, my cat needs a litter pan. I need to find someone that has a litter pan. Oh, I need to label my dog's carrier. I need to go find a Sharpie marker, or I need to go find duct tape. You know, oh, it's fly season. I need to go find fly spray. I don't need to find anything because I have a portable home with my pet that's set up and ready to go. So now, as far as your evacuation plan and knowing when to leave, I will tell you from personal experience that you need to make it easy on your pet, you need to make it easy on yourself, and you need to make it easy on your first responders. You need to leave early. The fires that were recently in Healdsburg and Windsor, about 2 months ago now, we had a family contact us about boarding their dogs and their cats, and they had horses that needed to come up to stay at a friend's house up here. So we talked to them in the morning. It was about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. They were under an evacuation warning. They were not mandated to leave. They were not ordered to leave. It was just a warning. We told them we would prefer if you come now, we're going to need time to do this. And they decided to wait. By the time the evacuation warning had been changed to a mandatory evacuation order, it was 6 o'clock at night. And they couldn't get the horses loaded in the horse trailer. It took them 2 hours to get these normally well-behaved, well-trained, well-socialized horses in their horse trailer because they were panicked. That upset the horses because now the horses' fight or flight response is starting to be triggered, and they couldn't get them in the trailer. By the time they got the horses in the trailer, it was 8 o'clock. That 2 hours is valuable when you're under an evacuation order. That 2 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes can all mean the difference between life or death. So make it easy and make it safe. By the time they got up here and they dropped off the horses and they came to us with the dogs and the cats, it was 10:30 at night. That was over 12 hours since we had had our first conversation with them. That makes for a long day. It makes for a frustrating day. It makes it difficult on the dogs. We're getting them set up and established, sorry about that, in a new environment. And it's dark out and we're trying to get them settled, and we can't get them settled because everyone's rushed and it's late at night. So leave early, get out of the way of the first responders, make it easy on yourself. Know that everybody else around you is trying to evacuate at the same time. And the time that you think it's going to take you to get somewhere is not going to be the time. It's going to take you much, much longer to get where you need to go. So how are you going to evacuate? Every person in the household needs to have a role. Who's going to grab the kit? Who's going to grab the leashes? Who's going to get the dogs in the crate? Who's going to get the horses? Who's going to load up what car? Who's going to do what? Have a plan. What if that person is gone? Who's going to take over that role? What if that person all of a sudden has an injury and they can't do it? Now who's going to help you? And don't rely on volunteers to come in and help you. Even though we have a large number of volunteers that have tons of experience in animal emergencies and animal evacuations, they may not be able to get to you. They may be evacuating themselves. They may be prohibited to get there. And also sometimes having untrained people in the disaster area creates more of a hazard and more of a risk for the first responders. So don't be one of those who has failed to plan and now creates a more difficult time for people needing to put out the fire, and they can't because they have to help you get your things together and get your animals out of there. Where are you going to go? Have a backup plan for where to go. You may not be able to get to the evacuation center. The evacuation center may be full. You may have a friend that said, yes, you can come stay with me, but maybe they don't want your dogs there, or maybe they're evacuating too. Maybe the hotel is full because the fires from the Bay Area, the people from Vacaville came up, from Fairfield came up, from Marin County, they came up and I filled up our hotels. So then when it was time for us to evacuate, there were no hotels available in Ukiah for people to stay. So have a plan and have a backup plan and have another backup plan. So here comes to the main portion of our discussion is we want to make it easy to evacuate with our pets. We want to make it easy for our pets to be at an evacuation center, whether it's an evacuation center for humans or one for animals or a hotel or a friend's house or a boarding kennel. We had, during the October 2017 fire, we had 75 dogs that were evacuated to our facility, which is double our normal capacity. So we had 4 dogs from a family that we had to call them within a couple of hours, and we had to tell them, you have to pick up your dogs, because we could not approach the dogs. We could not get the dogs out of the kennel. They wanted to lunge at us. We found out from a neighbor that the dogs had bit several people in the neighborhood. We had to call those owners and say, I'm sorry, we cannot house your dogs in this emergency because we cannot safely handle your dogs. So they had to come pick up their dogs and find alternate arrangements. So make it easy for people to manage your dogs. Teach your dogs how to be handled by strangers. Teach your dogs how to be leashed. Teach your dogs how to walk nicely on a leash. Maybe you have a dog that's just never going to get to that point to be comfortable around strangers, and that's okay. You know, that's just how they are. So what we can do to make them safe and to make other people safe is we can teach those dogs how to wear a basket muzzle. That way we can approach them safely. We can put a leash on them safely. We can get them where we need to go. And get them there safely with everybody else too. So also get your pet ready, microchip your pet, microchip your pet. During the October 2017 fires, we had 8 dogs that came in without owners. 4 were claimed within a couple of hours. The owners just needed to find out where their dogs had gone because their dogs were evacuated separately from them. 4 others were unclaimed at the end of a week. So they went to animal control. None of them were microchipped, but 2 of those dogs were claimed within 24 hours because the owner, who was busy for the week prior putting out his fires around his neighbors' houses, learned about the evacuation center at animal control, learned that dogs had been taken there. He was able to identify his dogs. But if his dogs would have been microchipped, we could have looked up the microchip and we could have contacted him and said, don't worry, your dogs are safe. He went a whole week in those fires without knowing if his dogs were alive or not. So the other 2 dogs were unclaimed. There was never an owner identified, and they were adopted out into a new home after the hold period was up. So crate train your pet. If you haven't already, teach your pet that the crate is one of the safest, best, most wonderful things around there. My dogs all, when they come, whether they're puppies, adults, whether they're young, adolescents, or middle age, are all taught the first thing. If you want to be absolutely safe and happy and have wonderful things happen to you, go in your crate. There's treats, there's snacks, there's toys, there's no noise. We use the Berry kennel, the hard-sided plastic ones. I don't use a wire kennel because they can't defend themselves. I want them to not feel threatened in their little den or when they're in their little crate. So we use the hard-sided Berry kennel. And also if I need to evacuate, I can stack crates on top of each other. I can stack things on top of the crate. I can pack things in the crate without worrying about the crate falling apart. The other thing is train your dog to an emergency recall. And our resources at the end, I put in some links to a really reliable recall and an emergency recall. You're only going to use this in extreme situations, when they're ready to bolt across the street, when you see a threat coming at them and you want to call them to you for safety. Again, teach your dog to accept a muzzle, and teach your horse to load quickly and cleanly, even if it's noisy and scary and windy and dark and things are banging around. You want that horse to think the trailer is the safest place to be ever, always, and forever. And you can teach your cat to come when called. But if you do have to leave and evacuate, leave the door open so your cat can get out and take care of themselves. But microchip your pets. So part of the plan, so we here at Blue Ribbon Pets, we have multiple emergency action plans. One of them is for fire. We have 2, one for a fire out in the community where people are evacuating to us with their pets, or their pets are evacuating to us. The other one is where we need to evacuate off the property, and we did just have to activate that action plan a couple of weeks ago when there was a fire just down the road. And even though it would have been okay for us not to evacuate, I did not want to be wrong, and I did not want to be at the very last minute trying to get out. So we evacuated early, which is what we always tell people to do. I don't care if it's mandatory, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get out now. We have all staff on duty, are trained. We go through emergency action plans all the time. We train for emergencies, whether it's a dog bite, a power outage, a broken water pipe, whatever it is, thunderstorms. We train for different events and different activities so that everybody knows what to do and how to do that. One of the deficiencies that we found a couple in our action plan, because afterwards you always want to review your plan and see where you have shortcomings or deficiencies and how to address that. One of them was the phone. The phone rang and rang and rang because we were getting Nixle alerts for our own fire just a block away. So we had to remember to deactivate the Nixle alert. We had clients calling in, inquiring about their pets, how to pick them up. We had people concerned asking us how we were. So we needed to find and develop a different plan for managing the phone situation. The other thing that we realized is that there can't be one person directing operations. There needs to be an automation to the operations. So now we are putting together a new list so that one person could be told, you're doing a cattery, there's a chart on the wall, and the chart has the steps that they need to take in order to evacuate the cattery. One person is told, here's your steps to take to evacuate the groom room. Another one is assigned the kennel, and another person is assigned the office. The other thing that we found out is traffic, and choosing a backup location is crucial. We had told clients, go meet us at this location here, but the problem was the people that were helping us could not get in. They could not get through the roadblocks. Some did not. So we need to identify and manufacture an ID system so that they can do that. The other thing is everybody that wanted to come look at the fire. All those people coming to look at the fire interfered with the ability of our necessary personnel to get here and help evacuate. So we have to refine our plan to take care of that situation. So as an example of our plan for the grooming shop, all pets immediately get locked up into crates. Any pets that are in the tub are rinsed out regardless of how clean they are. They are rinsed out to get the product out. They're wrapped up in towels. Everything is unplugged and shut off. We pull the cage cards, the leashes, the collars so that we have all of our identification that we need. We have our instructions that say to grab the grooming go box. We have a separate box set up for grooming that has emergency supplies to go with us. And we have our clipboard with our evacuation plan. It tells us who gets evacuated first and where. And then if we have time, do we have anything else that we can grab in the meantime? And so that's our just a quick overview of our evacuation plan for the grooming shop. So again, some problems that we had identified in our emergency plan. So now we come to the recovery process. Again, this is an emergency. We've activated the dog's fight or flight response. This is a serious, sudden, unexpected, dangerous event or situation, and we've had immediate action. But now we're in recovery. The action does not have to be immediate. So many people during the October 2017 fires, they had gotten the okay to go home. They wanted to come get their dogs immediately and go home. The problem was they had not been home yet to know if there was a home. Was the power on? Was the water on? Were there hazards? Were there still burning stumps or hot stumps in their yard? So don't be in a hurry to go home even though you want to. Take your time, go home, get your boots, your gloves, your safety equipment, your clipboard. Make sure it's safe for your family to return home. Make sure it's safe for your pets to go home. And then when it's time to bring your pets home, bring them home in the daytime. It's scary for them to go home into an area that is different. It smells different. It looks different. Things sound different. There's different people that have been through. The whole, what they perceive to be normal is different. And again, new or novel things are scary. New and novel things can kill you. And so those pets are deciding, do I live or do I die based on this information that's here? And they're not necessarily going to be looking to you for directions unless you've trained them, look to me for directions. So bring them home in the morning, help them get into a routine and get settled in. Remember, just as you have PTSD from an emergency, so can your pets. A sudden sound, a smell, an action, the presence of a particular item can all trigger that fight or flight response due to the previous emotional trauma that they had. A failure to plan is a plan to fail. Make it automatic, make it easy. When you make it easy and you make it automatic, you become more successful, you become safer, and then you can help others in your community to be safer also. You can help other pets that are in evacuation centers. You can help other pets be evacuated. So here's a list of resources.